Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's committee meetings. We're going to start with policy committee, but we'll first start with public comment.
Ms. Rashman.
Oh yeah, sorry. Superintendent.
Good evening. On behalf of the Board of School Directors and the Penn, I'll start over on behalf of the Board of School Directors and the Penn Ridge School District. We would like to wish our veterans a happy Veterans Day. There was a wonderful ceremony held today at the high school in the auditorium where we honored community veterans and our employees, and it was sponsored by Representative Craig Statt. So on behalf of the board and the district, we just wanted to wish our veterans happy Veterans Day. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rash.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. I'll put the 1 minute sign up when it's ready. And up first we have Richard Burns.
Thank you. At the last policy committee meeting, I believe it was October 14th, Mrs. Rash made a comment about what best practices are for dealing with children or students who present themselves to a student with a request for pronouns and name and so forth. Are you kidding? To me, this is an outrage that you want to keep things secret from parents. I don't think that there's a parent in this room who would say it's okay to keep secrets from them regarding...
Speak for yourself, Frank.
No interruptions, please.
Regarding the health of their child who is about to take on a course of life that's life-altering, possibly life-threatening. This is just unbelievable that an elected official of the school board could advocate to keep things secret from parents. So I challenged anyone in this room. Who were the people that raised their hand again? Okay, that's what I expected. Besides the risk to the student and keeping secrets from parents and driving a wedge between the child and his or her parent, you're also exposing the district to future adverse litigation. An example being the January Littlejohn case and many other cases across the country. Board members that have this mindset, I feel, are a hindrance to attaining the goals and mission of the Penn Ridge School District. Current best practices, which Mrs. Rash mentioned, from a 2022 Journal of the American Psychological Association, state, this is current, and for 1 minute remaining, evidence-based comprehensive care is imperative, which includes involving parents and caregivers. By supporting parents and caregivers, mental health providers can provide improved outcomes for the whole family, kids and parents. And the conclusion was that working with parents and caregivers to transgender youth is an integral part of competent gender-affirming care. So parents are the ones that care for their kids the most, and they should be involved. How can you deny parents being involved? Thank you.
Up next we have Laura Foster.
Well, that was entertaining. Laura Foster, East Rockville. As a therapist, I can tell you very deeply about what evidence-based practices are. When you read something in JAMA that says an evidence-based practice is integrating family and community into a child or an adult or whoever's therapeutic technique, it doesn't take it, it's not taking it as unilaterally. If there is someone that is of detriment to your life, then you're not including them in your clinical practice. So if there's a woman who's being abused, am I going to ask her partner to come in and be a part of the practice? That's what you're saying is evidence-based practice. If there is a child who's being sexually assaulted by the parent, you bring them in. Is that part of this? You can't quote stuff without knowing what you're talking about. So just bring that in a second. So I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of students as an ask you to repeal the advocacy policy and restore the original political activity policy. We all know this isn't just about banning flags or symbols. It's about a climate of hate that has been manifested by 4 of the 9 board members who seem more focused on silencing our students than supporting them. These board members have pushed policies that undermine our BIPOC and LGBTQIA students, creating barriers for teachers who simply want to support and care for all children. Where is the data behind these decisions? There isn't any. The only thing behind it is the voice of your lobbyists over here. They have no real stake in our school. No study or school data supports these actions. This is about appeasing a few literal members of hate groups instead of listening to the needs of your students. I ask you, as elected leaders, how can you stand behind the distributors of racism, sexism, gender discrimination, when our priority should be creating a safe space for every child? These policies and the anecdotes that they use to defend them don't belong in public education. They belong in Project 2025, along with the dismantling of public education. So when these ding-dongs start asking for that, to dismantle public education, are you going to be moderate with that and kind of come to a middle ground with that? So those board members who fight for our students, thank you. For those who don't, your decision has been made, and your decision to not support our students clearly identifies you as homophobic racists. Tonight you stand and you have a choice: protect the rights and dignity of every student, or stand with those who seek to strip them away. Thank you.
Next is Kim Bedellian.
Tough ideas.
Bedellian, Hercusy Borough. In regard to the advocacy policy, I think it's important to remember how we got here.
Yeah,
Memories.
Quiet, come on, let's keep it orderly, we're doing well here.
This is talking the whole time I'm speaking.
All right, I'm just gonna pause it. I'll give you some time back. I'm sorry.
Or we have to start doing something where they just don't follow the audience.
Everyone,
And
it's
we'd
happening across the
also
board.
like to
so.
remind everybody to address the board, not people in the audience.
All right, go ahead, thank.
In regard to the advocacy policy, I think it's important to remember how we got here. If memory serves, at the beginning of the 2021 school year, a Penridge English teacher and advisor to Penridge's Gay Straight Alliance Club distributed Safe Triangle rainbow stickers to teachers and staff for display in classrooms, offices, on desks for the stated objective of establishing safe spaces for LGBTQ students. This same teacher doubled down on her advocacy by displaying this large poster in her room on back to school night. It reads, "This is a safe and inclusive space for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students and their families." This justifiably created some concern within the community about the appropriateness of singling out one group over other groups, the appropriateness of highlighting the sexuality of students, creating a false narrative that a teacher has to display a certain sticker for students to be safe. The school board and community debated the issue, and the current advocacy policy was passed in September of 2022, which essentially stated that teachers were to remain neutral in the classroom so that all students felt safe and accepted, and that teachers were not to engage during work hours in advocating for their personal beliefs on issues including, but not limited to, religion, sexual orientation, and gender identity, social, political, and geopolitical matters. The newly elected school board members who ran a campaign focused on raising state rankings, getting rid of Vermillion, and retaining teachers now wish to put the current advocacy policy on the chopping block. A very wise 6th grade teacher once taught me that when creating a rule or law, you have to consider how that rule or law might be carried out if the person or group in power is not one with whom you agree ideologically. To that end, I want to show you a series of pictures that could very well end up being in Penridge classrooms and on staff members. So you guys all became book banners, every one of you, when you banned a book where you said it wasn't appropriate, and I commend you. But a teacher could say, today's a good day for the good guys to be reading banned books. It could be wearing that. There could be posters, power, about banning books and reading banned books. We could have posters about Palestine will be free, making Israeli students uncomfortable. I stand with Israel, making Palestinian students uncomfortable. Abortion is health care, could be on the wall. Stop abortion now, could be on another wall. Protect the unborn, stand up, speak up, that could be on the wall. I can't breathe, abolish the police, defund the police, Blue Lives Matter, trans women are women, save women's sports, this child does not belong in a men's bathroom, could be on the wall. And my favorite, this was on a classroom, in this room, we believe that the American dream is a scam. Policing originates from runaway slave patrols, capitalism exploits, colonialism
Time
is
is up.
evil, and America was built on genocide and slavery. This is what we could be looking forward to.
That was great.
Next is Phoebe Wilcox.
So I personally feel that it'd be okay to hang all of those things up because the America that I know and love should not be in the business of censorship, and this is, Penridge is an institution of learning, and each and every sign that you held up there could make for incredible lesson plans and discussions participated in by both sides. And in a fair and uncontentious manner. It would be a great opportunity for learning on both sides. So I know that you were showing all those signs as something that we should just be horrified at, but, actually, I think, and I think when people say, oh, well, we're being neutral by not having a pride sign up. Well, no, that's just censorship. And like I said before, this isn't a Christian school, and it is, in America we have separation of church and state. So, if you get to, putting, religious iconography on the wall or something, that's different. But, philosophical differences or, anything of that nature would just make for good discussion. So I do advocate for reverting to the original policy. That, I think to not allow teachers to support marginalized students of whatever kind of group is unfair to those students, and it does sort of encourage a bully type of atmosphere, to bloom. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
Just like to remind everyone to address your comments to board members, please.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Address your comments to board members, please. Thank you. That's in our updated policy. Up next is Janelle Montague.
Janelle Montague, Hilltown. Last week, President Trump won the Penridge area overwhelmingly. We had record turnout of over 80%, and he won every single precinct in Penridge. It reinforces that we are a very moderate district. When the Democrat majority ran, you did not run on terminating the biological sex bathroom policy or advocacy policy. In fact, you avoided questions on those issues and refused to give details on your positions. Lying and avoiding stances on important topics in order to trick voters to get in office is deceptive and wrong. It is the reason why I and many other community members have lost some respect for you. You used the Biden-Harris Title IX changes as an excuse to remove the biological sex bathroom policy. Not only were those changes struck down in numerous courts, President Trump will be removing them as soon as he gets into office in January. You should be adding the reinstatement of the bathroom and locker room policy to your agenda ASAP. You know the vast majority of this community wants it back, and legally speaking, the district will have more than the right to do so. If you don't do this, please tell the community why not. You also should be keeping the advocacy policy. Having a neutral environment in the classroom is the right thing to do. You should trust all of your teachers to handle issues facing any of their students with dignity. They don't need a special sticker to do that. If there is an issue, it is in both the student and teacher's best interest to evaluate the situation and get parents and counselors involved if it's significant. Teachers are not educated to be child psychologists, and it's not fair to put them in that position. Plus, there should never be conversations about sexuality without consent of parents. You all sit up there on the board making a big deal about legal costs, yet this is a recipe for many future lawsuits, just like the bathroom policy. Bradley, why is having a neutral classroom bad? Why can't all teachers be there for all students? Ron, are you okay with a MAGA flag in the classroom? If you allow one, you must allow them all. Carolyn, are you okay with the teacher having a deep conversation with a student about their sexuality or gender without the parents knowing? What if those parents are not okay with that and they sue us? And the censorship comment, it's not censorship when it's teachers, they're an authority figure to children. So them giving their positions is pushing their views on their students. It's different. You can continue to implement radical left agenda, which you did for voters, but I promise it'll come back to bite you. Biden-Harris policies drove this country into the ground, and the nation clapped back on election day. If you continue to push your leftist wish list instead of focusing on academics, which is actually what you ran on, you will hurt our district greatly, and I'm certain that voters will show you the door in 3 years. I honestly believe that will be a very long time before the community would trust Democrats running. On Tuesday, United States, Pennsylvania, Bucks County, and Penridge all voted for common sense leadership. Hopefully at least one of you will start governing that way. Oh, and it would be nice if you could condemn your family and friends that come here and shriek and comment when people are talking. They did it to Dr. Burns, and they did it when I was speaking last week. I hate public speaking, I get extremely nervous. So when I have someone in the audience shrieking while I talk, it's very difficult. And she's a family member of a board member, and it's really rude.
All right, that was the last public comment. So moving forward with the policy committee, we are going to start with the policy update plan. So as was already on the agenda tonight is second read of political activities. I did want to talk a little bit more around, first of all, the surveys policy, just so we could get an idea of what sort of changes people are looking for, so we can start working on a first read on that, and the same with the conduct and disciplinary procedures. But I'll start with, are there other policies that people would like to add?
No.
Okay. So if we begin with the surveys policy, this was something that we had a consensus on and moving forward. I want to get a little more information around what are the aspects of this that we're looking to change.
Can I just ask a question, Leah? In general, with this policy plan, are we, because I know I emailed about when and how does something like move from the bottom to top? Generally speaking, unless there's some urgent issue, are we going in order and addressing these as they come up on the policy plan?
Right. So we talked about this multiple times. The purpose of this is for us to have that discussion. And so I'm assuming you're assuming the advocacy policy, you're referring to that.
No, I was actually talking because we started about surveys and that's at the bottom. My question is, like, is the next thing we address dressing grooming, because that was the next thing to come on this, and then like, are we working down?
So dressing and grooming was a PSBA update that Ernest and I already know what we have to do to go through, we just haven't gotten to it. So that wasn't with the committee together with the board members. I'm going through the board initiated policies.
And one of the responsible contractor policy is next before this.
Right, so there was already a meeting around that. We discussed this also, where we met with Sean and Kelly, and they heard Chris's ideas around this. They were going to go back and see if it was already covered in their contract policies, et cetera, and get back to us. But we said they could do it on their time.
And I'm sorry, what meeting was it? Held meeting with Sean and Kelly to discuss idea?
Right.
That was
Came out of one of our meetings where they were gonna discuss it further.
so it was a private meeting or it was at a committee meeting?
No,
It was
just
a private meeting,
it was
which was discussed before we did it
just reasonable.
at the committee meeting
I would
that
say
we
it's
would
like
be
a
doing that.
feasibility, just to see if it's really worth doing it, or and you need to get to the details of that?
And that was the action item that was discussed at that committee meeting, that that would be the next step.
I don't think it ever was intended to be in order of what's there, though.
Well, that's my question, is
Yeah,
it
that's my
appears
opinion.
like we're like working down, but that's my question, is that
So,
generally speaking what we're doing?
I think here's the clarity ask. Is this supposed to be an ordered list, or more specifically, is this just as these become ready, these are things that are coming in the future,
Yes.
as administration is ready for them to be rolled out, or the chairs are ready for them to be rolled out, that's when they are brought up to us.
So if they're board initiated, the administration is gonna go off of what the board is asking them to do. So they're not just going to do it, a lot of these are board initiated, so then again, which ones get determined which go first? Is it the administration, what you're saying, Bradley, is that it's the administration?
I'm asking, but I'm assuming that it's as they are ready, that's when they come up to.
I'm gonna
agenda
ask
items.
that committee members, like, if you don't remember, please go and rewatch the meetings that you actually attended. So the September 3rd meeting, we actually walked through all of this multiple times around consensus gathering, et cetera. At the September 3rd meeting, we added surveys and the conduct disciplinary procedures. We had already had the responsible contractor policy and advocacy on here. So those just got added afterwards.
So it's not a case of having to rewatch anything. It's just very cut and dry, specific question. It sounds like we're gonna have a focus right now on surveys, not knowing that we were gonna be discussing that more in detail or what the concern is. So like not knowing that we're gonna have a discussion on that specifically. That was not discussed in the September 3rd meeting, you know, how we're gonna work through these, but now it looks like we're gonna be discussing surveys.
I think
We're not
just looking-
discussing
Yeah, I think
If you're
surveys.
open-
So we're not discussing surveys in particular. Those two are two that were added at the September 3rd meeting, that there was like an initial discussion around it. And honestly, I'm working very hard to have as many discussions like with everyone as possible. So we're starting with, can we have a quick discussion around surveys and like the direction we want to take with it? So that way we can go back and start working on what we want to change in these policies to bring them back for a first read. Now, depending on where the discussion goes, some of them might just naturally float up to be easier to do than others, and we would prioritize them first.
So I guess
So-
that's was my question. If we went through this, I don't remember going through this in detail. I've been confused. When you first started doing this, or however, it seemed like a good way to see a snapshot of like what we're doing next.
Yeah,
But it isn't necessarily always next, so I'm just trying to get clarity on exactly how it does work. So it's laid out, but how should we expect it to work? I don't really care, I'm just curious.
you seem to care. So at the
I mean,
September
nice to know
3rd
I'm on the board,
meeting,
but more I'm curious.
at the end of the September 3rd meeting, we said that we're going to work on first read for advocacy for the next committee meeting. That was said. So at the
Okay.
next committee meeting, when there was like surprise that it was there, was a little surprising to me because we literally discussed it. Then we also said we were going to meet with Sean and Kelly at the September 3rd meeting to talk to them about responsible contractor, which is what we've done. So now I'm starting with the next two.
To be honest, I
And
didn't know
starting
that
to
meeting was
talk-
held.
I'm
Didn't know
sorry?
it was held. Even if that was this discussion, like we're gonna have this meeting, I didn't realize that meeting was already held.
This was talked about at the last policy committee.
That the meeting was already held.
Yes. So we can, the point of this is to start talking about what direction are we trying to take with surveys and conduct and disciplinary procedures. So is there, because I've been working very hard with the board, trying to get as much information as you would like to share with us before we start addressing them, which by the way, I've gotten nothing from anyone, just to be clear. And
We don't know when we're addressing them, that's what I'm trying to ask. Like, I
No.
don't know when, I can address surveys, but it
Literally,
looks like that's 8 meetings
the
away.
September 3rd meeting, I said, we will be having first draft of advocacy at the next one. If there is any information you would like Ernest and I and leadership to have in order to formulate these things, please send it.
There was an email that was sent out.
And
Yeah, but
emails.
We're not wanting to
I'm
change
just
the advocacy
talking
policy, so we
generally.
would not be sending you suggestions to change.
No, but if there are suggestions to keep it, like
Why?
what information do you have to support keeping it? Those are the things that we wanted shared so that everyone has this.
We had a
I
lengthy
get-
discussion in the last policy committee meeting as to why and reasons why we want to keep that policy. So I don't even know, maybe, I don't know, maybe you need to rewatch that video to see
No,
why
we
we want to
watched
still
it.
keep the policy 321. We
Right,
had a
but-
lengthy discussion.
A lot of those questions were answered, that even the examples you brought up wouldn't even have been covered by the advocacy policy, correct?
I understand we're on advocacy now, and that's fine. My only question, and it seems to, I truly don't know why you seem upset by it, is when we look at this tonight, or in a week, or a month, or a year, are we working down the list? And if not, if I look at this for next month, should I assume next month we're gonna talk about conduct and disciplinary action or dress and grooming, because it's next? I'm really just a sincere question of like, what order is this working in?
That's what I'm trying to get to. So
Okay,
I want to understand what people's expectations are around these two. And honestly, even if someone decides to propose another policy and we add that to the discussion, that might be one that we're like, oh, this is a very quick and easy change that everyone agrees to. So that might be the first read at the next meeting. Like, this is meant to work holistically, but it only works if people are like willing to engage and remember what we're talking about and ready to come with, like, ready for discussion.
So it's a fluid list.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been said it's been fluid since the first time it's been posted. So
well, I know I emailed specifically asking that question and didn't get an answer like a month ago, like, are we working in order, or how is this?
no, you asked how
Yeah.
advocacy got to the top of the list.
I'm pretty sure, and I said, are we going
Right.
down or not?
And
Because
she
it was
asked
at the
the
bottom and
question.
now it's at the top, which is fine, it's just, I
Right,
would
so
assume to
if
get
you'd
ready
have
for
looked at
that.
the versions of the policy update plan, it was the bottom and then two more were added underneath. That's what changed.
okay. So,
Yeah,
what's
I
the
mean,
question about
it's a
surveys?
fluid list, and if something's easy, it's gonna jump to the top. It should not be construed as we're gonna do anything in order. Or maybe, like she said, something might come up and we'll go right to it because it's a simple fix. So usually the one from the PSBA are simple and we just come up when needed, but
Right.
there's no order in there. And you will get a copy of the first read before the meeting so you can read it.
That's fine,
and
okay, so there is no order, that's
Yeah.
kind of all I was asking.
That's what-
We even kicked around going through all the policies at some point methodically and looking at
Yeah, I mean, there's
how
a
they
a
are.
minor backlog of PSBA updates that we
Yeah.
need to go through too. I know there's quite a bit that needs to be done, but we just haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
Right.
So as we go through those, we will also add them on here too, that these are PSBA updates and how we're moving.
So my only feedback on surveys is what I originally said, which is make it an opt-out. An opt-in survey is proved to be fairly useless in getting good data, and I think it's a minor change. I don't know if there's anything else that really needs to be changed.
Would it still be
Yeah.
like when you log your child in at the
Mhm.
beginning of the year, you have to say opt in or opt out?
Yeah, it would be a default, or
Well, that's what we'd have to work out.
well,
so
those could be
those are-
intended in an AR too.
But I think those are the things we can write down as questions that need to be addressed, like how does this work? If we switch it back to opt-out, is it by survey? Is it just flat question at the beginning of the year, et cetera?
I would like to see it in the beginning of the year stuff, so that every parent's getting it, and they're aware that they're either making a choice to allow
Right.
surveys or not.
That's fair.
Well, every parent is notified when their child is taking a survey. So,
Yeah, I think we could get into those details later. We could get more granular if it's the will of the board, if we could do it as an AR, have a correspondence go out, or when parents log in at the beginning of the year, they check a box, I don't want my child involved in any surveys, or I know that all surveys that do go out, typically a principal sent a correspondence home. And it will explicitly state, if you don't want your child to participate, let us know. So we can work those details out, I think, when we get there.
so maybe that's something that we can have ready for the next meeting too, of
Yeah.
like just how
We can
would
mock up
we,
some different.
like scenarios, how this would work out, and if that would help with the issues that the whole just like opting out of everything is causing with like holes in our data and incomplete results. Because I think we need to weigh it with both aspects of it, that if we have so many people opting out, it makes the survey a little less effective.
No, we can
The
work.
challenge
I
is though, there's so many emails and people miss emails and don't, and then somebody's upset because they don't realize that this class is doing this survey. That's how we initially got to it. And I guess we'll talk about that. You're saying we'll talk about that in the
Yeah,
next policy.
so we'll talk
Yeah.
about
I'm
the
sorry.
operations of opting out, opting in.
But
I want to readdress the wording around controversial surveys. I just don't know.
a safeguard we could add, though, I feel more comfortable if a letter goes home from the principal, where we won't be issuing surveys every day or every week. Letter goes home, just in case it's, I think it gives us a greater safeguard, that if a letter goes home to the parents and guardians, and they have an opportunity to send an email with good documentation there, rather than hitting a field in a student information system. Gives more ownership, with our 6,700 plus students to.
That's fine. And then in response to that letter, they would have to opt in or opt out to that survey you're
Correct.
saying?
No,
That's
it's
fine.
opt in.
No, opt out.
And they would
Opt
only
out.
if they opt out,
Opt out.
like actively opt out.
Right.
Basically, I think of it as a manpower issue. Opt out, your people who do not want to be involved, they're letting you know, you remove them, you have a letter that's going home, that number of letters that comes in. Opt-in surveys, on the other hand, that's going to take a lot more manpower in terms of specifically then listing just the names of students who are taking the survey, as well as potentially tracking down and trying to get that information and additional levels of asking parents, are you doing this, are you not doing this? I think it just creates more communications
I think that's kind of how
back
we
and
got
forth.
it on the webpage in the beginning to avoid that, because then it's just, you're not tracking anybody. Now, whether on the first day you opt in of everything or opt out of everything, doesn't matter, but
Right.
it eliminated the tracking anything down.
But what we lost is an ability to have like a pulse on what's happening in our student body around some of the issues. And I mean, PAYS was brought about initially, from my understanding, something like PAYS was brought around when, like, I believe it came from Columbine, and because parents were like, how do we, are there any even little things we can do to try and get a pulse on things before they get bad for kids, and before they reach that level? And that's where PAYS evolved from, is trying to get a gauge on the entire student community on
Right, I
what do we
understand
think
that.
are like the boiling points for these kids. And so if there's a movement that like that is something that parents should be fearful of, or parents should, have a lot of concerns around, then it ends up being ineffective. And so I would propose, even just from a mathematical perspective, that if we have something like this, it's only people are only not taking it if that parent actively opts them out. And if that doesn't happen, then they are part of the survey.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying then I think if that's how we're doing it, it should be right out of the gate at the beginning of the year, because there are parents who don't want their kids taking it.
Well, we aren't gonna know what all the different surveys are at the beginning of the year all the time though either.
So we do offer opt-in, I think it's opt-out for things like having your child in photographs and pictures.
Right.
So as an administrator, though, you're saying for surveys specifically, your preference would be a specific letter going home when that survey is going to
Yes.
happen?
For
The legal
opting out.
work
Yeah, I would
for
For opting out.
For opting out.
You say letter, like physical letter or email?
email.
Yes.
Because even some emails go to spam, like I find it in mine sometimes in my spam, and that's where sometimes I think things get missed. But I know physical, you have to print a bunch.
So we'll start, as more admin, we'll start taking a stab on what the preferences would be for like opting in and opting out. And then I think regardless of what happens, part of that would have to be timing of it too, because if parents have already filled that out in Power School for this year and this policy changes, like what does that mean? And maybe that's a question for Mike. Like, do we ask them again or,
Just to
I'm sure we can make it effective.
Well, so I
I'm
think,
sure it's a way.
but I think it would be helpful to have like more details from him
Okay.
on what that would mean. Any other comments on surveys?
Actually, can I jump back for a second, Leah?
Yeah,
To adding to the list is that when I was looking through policies, the school code requires that the bullying policy is updated every 3 years. And our bullying, cyber bullying policy was last updated January 26th of 21.
Which policies, Chris?
The
Bullying.
bullying, cyber bullying,
Do you know the number?
249.
that should be every 3 years. Okay.
That's it, by public school code, it's every 3 years.
Oh, 249, okay. So we can,
Change or no change, it just needs to be.
it's something that needs to be reviewed so we can get it on the list. All right. We will add that.
Okay.
Any other comments around policy, around survey policy that you would like to discuss with us before we start crafting a first read? I think the parts around protected information are already state code. I mean, I guess we could keep it in here, but I feel like we might be better off just referring to state code than listing them.
You're talking about
Yeah,
language.
I'm just flipping
Just talking
through
about
the
the
policy
surveys as
around like
always.
the protected information around
Actual
like
language.
sex behaviors, like those sort of
Wait,
things.
what policy? are you-
Surveys, this is back on
Oh.
surveys.
I'm so sorry, I really thought I had that off.
Is that on the agenda?
No,
No,
it's just reference.
we're just trying to understand, like surveys was brought up 2 committee meetings ago. And so if this is when we're gonna start looking at, what are the things that people want us to pay attention to? And you can even email us after the meeting, but
Yeah, we don't
we
have
didn't
it.
know if we wanted to have a public discussion around some of them or not. But that's coming, and then the other one was conduct and disciplinary procedures. So that was, Jordan, you were talking about that one. Hold on.
Right, it was mainly that one section that I just didn't know, and maybe this is something that can be removed, because I feel like, Mr. Barrios, I feel like you answered it, because I was thinking like the part where, like if something happens for staff and it has like a written verbal, or it could be like a verbal or written, to me, I felt like you would never know, like could somebody just get, whatever, a bunch of verbals and nothing like kind of escalates. But I feel like you mentioned it might be somewhere else, so it might be okay, I don't know. That's my only concern, like if there was something that happened and you have something that happens with a staff member, maybe over and over again, and it only shows like verbal, I don't know if it should be more like specified as an escalating and not just like one single line. That was all.
Well, we're currently working on revisions to our employee handbook. In fact, I believe we have a completion as of Friday. Ms. Mossman's in the audience, so it'll be something
So that
we'll
will be
certainly
kind of in
consider.
there.
But I will tell you that, since I've been here, we're not just verbally warning
Sure.
folks. Not that we have employees getting into trouble, but it's not just verbal warnings.
I don't know if that's
There's-
something we needed to put, I don't know, put,
There is language in the policy, if you look at it, at the end of it, before the section on arrest or conviction, which hopefully won't apply to anyone. It does talk about progressive disciplinary measures outside of just verbal and written warnings, and it goes through, which should be part of the handbook as well, but it does address that through board policy. Again, it's the last paragraph after delegation, under delegation of responsibility. So it speaks to that very issue you just identified.
wait, the last paragraph,
Right after
That-
number 13.
right, where,
So yeah, if
but
you
it
go
almost seems like it's after like criminal history background, is
to,
that what?
before that, before that.
It says rules and procedures that provide progressive penalties, including but not limited to verbal warning, written warning, reprimand, suspension, demotion, termination.
So that's what I was talking about, like, again, like, there just wasn't like it wasn't like, okay, number one, you receive a verbal warning, number two, then you should get a written, like, I didn't know that was part of like this, the part of discussion, because again, could you just give, you know, a ton of verbal warnings, or, you know, you also don't wanna go the opposite way, and be to, you know, give a suspension without having like a written or a verbal. That was my only point, like, it just kinda looks like they're all together, and it's not kind of listed out. But again,
I
maybe.
think it depends though, because it depends on the severity, just like with a
Sure.
student, on the severity of the infraction, what level does it rise to? So it's hard to really say, we're gonna penalize an offense this way without looking at possibly a pattern of conduct that would be detrimental to the district, or a one-time, very, very serious violation. So that may escalate you to the top right
Sure.
away. So again, it just depends on what that is.
So you think, and I guess I would just defer to the administration on that, you know, if you feel like that's something that should be either reworded or left alone. I know you said you're working on the handbooks, and maybe there'll be more information, and we might not need to, you know, come to this policy and edit anything.
Can I add, yeah, the concern I have is, and we've been through this a number of times, where we have a lot of verbal warnings, but they're not documented, or are they documented? And then when something escalates, then we get sued and said, well, there was just this one warning, so I don't know how, I think that,
Yeah.
that's my concern is,
I agree.
there's been situations where there were a lot of warnings, but nothing documented, and we know how that hurts us when we go to court. So I don't know if that's addressed in, is that addressed in your
I
question?
typically wouldn't do this, but our human resources director is seated
Come up
right
to the
here, and I
hot
know
seat,
she
Tara.
wants to say something. Why don't you
Yeah,
come
come on
sit
up.
so you're on record, please?
Yeah, you got your name.
Your name tag's there, so.
Yeah,
This is student, not staff.
this
right?
is staff.
This is staff.
Oh,
Staff.
Yeah.
You want me on that? So we are currently putting together administrative regulations in the HR department as well. And one of the admin regs that we're working on right now is discipline. So it would walk through in an administrative regulation when something comes in and an incident occurs in a building, we look at personnel files to see, has this happened previously? So there's a procedure in place within the HR department as to how we handle each one of those individual situations that comes and is brought to our attention as administration.
So that, like, I know you said you're working on the AR, will that be something that will get attached then once it's ready to, like, the policy, or where, does that go public, or how does that?
We can
We
share
make
that
our AR
information.
public, we're not hiding anything. but-
Sure, I just didn't know if, like, we're, like, sometimes I know, like, there'll be policies and then the AR is attached to the bottom, so I didn't know if that would just be something that.
I'm just not quite sure exactly what the concern is though, because I mean, obviously no discipline system is perfect.
Right.
And then like, but if there was a verbal warning first and then someone decides to do something more egregious, then that doesn't make that verbal warning first any less.
I think it was
Proper.
actually
It does.
how Ron
It does.
mentioned
It
it was
does.
like the perfect way that I
We've-
can put it into words.
We had
to be
people who
honest.
we only had one written complaint, but many, many verbal complaints. And then when they come bring a suit against us, all we have to show them is one complaint. And
Right.
then we end up, looking very bad, even though there is an issue with.
Well, no, there's complaints and then there's discipline.
Yeah,
Well,
but these
like a
were-
verbal
When there's an
reprimand.
issue.
Okay,
verbal
so they have many
warnings,
verbal
and they're not
reprimands.
documented, and they're not
I mean, there should be a
documented.
process, right?
Yeah, like
Process of
wouldn't
what the
verbal
I don't know how to
reprimands
solve that,
be
but I mean, it's something that we've got bitten on a few times, where, we're in a bad position, so I don't know if that's something that's fixed.
And I
It
think
is
that's
concern.
why we're putting the process in place for the steps to take when there is a concern with a staff member in a building, and we're putting those steps and sharing that out with our building administrators so that we're all on the same page and we're being consistent throughout the district.
So then I'm more, so there's like a formal verbal reprimand, right? Where like you sit down with your supervisor and you're like, I verbally told them, blah, blah, blah. And then there's,
Written.
I think I'm losing Ron here, but there's a verbal reprimand that's just in like a conversation, like you need to stop doing that. What are those sort of things that we're
Is
that
that
we're expecting to
documented?
document?
The building level would
Yeah.
document that written conversation with a staff member.
Right.
And then when it escalates to the next level, If there's a written warning, that written warning goes into their personnel file, so that would come over to myself as well as an administrator. If it was an employee that Ernest oversees, then he would be copied on that as well, so that we all are in the loop of what's happening in each one of these situations.
Sounds like maybe we weren't doing that before, so we should be.
And
Right.
by having the administrative regulation, we're just ensuring that everyone is on the same page, administration, so that we are being consistent district-wide.
So can you connect all those dots for me? This AR you're talking about is a departmental AR.
It lives in the HR department.
Is it
yes.
connected to this policy in any way?
No.
No. Okay. So what is this policy? I guess I could bring it up, but
Yeah,
what-
so if it's not connected, but it does deal with,
It is interconnected because when you look at the policy and it walks you through what the steps of progressive discipline are, that is what the AR also lists, but it lists out in detail what the expectation would be. When you look at a written warning, having that conversation, where is it documented? Who participates in those meetings? Because again, depending on what staff members you're speaking with, you have to include representatives from their union. So the AR goes into greater detail than the policy does, but it aligns directly with staff discipline.
Okay, so why wouldn't we reference that AR in the policy? Or, footnote or something like that?
We could certainly do that when we review this policy.
Okay,
You know,
okay,
Connected to, I don't have, it right now, it's not
Right.
linked, but.
okay.
And then
Is
that could be the easy next step then, because I agree, like, we don't have many ARs up in board docs, like, this is something that's been new with this administration, so if we feel like that would be helpful, that might be what the update is then. Okay, all right.
Is this connected to or separate part of an employee handbook, or is that a completely separate thing?
I'd
Because are
say-
we also working on that?
The progressive discipline steps would be included in the
Part
employee
of- okay,
handbook,
all
so
right.
that all employees are aware of what steps are taken should there be a concern brought to the administration.
That's also something you guys are working on right now, did I hear
Yes.
that
Yes.
correctly?
It was completed Friday, I have not reviewed it.
Wow, impressive, okay.
Thank you.
All right, so for next, it doesn't look like there's much we need to do with the policy right now. We'll maybe get a version of the AR around on your
We'll share
timeline,
the
like,
employee
yeah,
handbook first.
on your timeline. Let
And
us
then
know
we'll-
once you
sure.
guys have had a good chance to scrub it, and then you can come out to the board and be like, all right, just attach it to the policy. Hopefully that's the solution, but
Sounds good.
if not, we'll bring it up. And then I will follow up with Mike, that even if attaching an AR has to go through first read and second read, but on the process. Okay. And then Chris, I have policy 249 as one that we'll add to there also. Okay, so next is, we're actually going to go to, hold on, I've opened too many things. The political activities, second read.
Wait, can I interrupt for 1 second before we
Yes.
start a new subject? I just wanted to also say, Angela, thank you for your service. I wanted to interrupt earlier when you said something about Veterans Day, but we didn't pause long enough, so thank you for.
You also have to wish him a happy birthday.
Is today your birthday?
No, the Marine Corps' birthday was yesterday.
yesterday, yeah.
Too kind, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy Veterans Day.
Okay, so we'll open up political activity for second read. And there have been no changes to this since it was voted through for first read.
Technically didn't have a first read though. I know we voted it through, but it's not like we looked at the notes of it.
No,
Are
we
we
went through,
discussing advocacy?
we went through this policy. We read through it on September 3rd.
We did not read through this. We
Yes,
did
we-
not.
Ernest
Wait,
opened it and we went through it. And then the end of the meeting was the discussion around, well, we did go through it.
We discussed it. We said that this is what you all wanted to go back to for this one, but we did not go through it and read it.
It was opened up and we walked through it.
We did not walk through this.
Yeah, we did. I don't know how to answer that question. We did. So we read through it, and that was the reason why it was brought up at the end of that meeting, where I followed up with Mike on, since we did read through it, there was a consensus that we just wanted to roll back to this version of the policy. Could we take it to a vote, or did we have to bring it back to committee? And we were allowed to take it to vote.
So I would just like to roll it back to what we had.
Yeah. I'm still on board with that it should just roll back. So I don't have any comments, but it's open to the floor.
I do, I have a bunch, but, so we're basically separating advocacy and political activities at this point, right?
We're removing policy around advocacy, right, it's being removed. So it'll be replaced with back to the political advocacy.
Okay.
Political
so
activities.
Political activities is just political activities.
Yes,
Advocacy, you want to just eliminate?
it's gone.
Okay, well, not yet.
Well,
but,
when
I
this
know
gets
you want it to be gone. What about, I understand there was, I don't know, don't want to say an AR, something for administration that kind of touched on advocacy, but we didn't get a chance to talk about that. Do you know, you can bring us up to speed on that?
I'll speak to that, if
Okay.
it's okay. Ernest and I collaborated on an AR, or a potential policy. And in my personal opinion, when you have advocacy, the way it's written here, he and I agreed, we don't look at advocating for students as a dirty word, a bad word. We think advocacy can come in many forms. So, for example, when I was a teacher, some of my students who were interested in, it is Veterans Day, the military, they would ask me about my service and felt comfortable, and I would talk to them. If I see, so that was my form of advocating. These kids here, call the recruiter, this is how it works, you go to boot camp. So I had that bond with these students. Secondly, if I noticed a student's behavior change in the classroom, maybe withdrawn, appearing sullen, I maybe talk to the counselor. I've noticed a discernible change in the student's behavior. And that's a form of advocacy.
Right.
I didn't have to do anything. But I did that to try to get this, or maybe phone call home. I've noticed your child the grades are dropping, things are different, is everything okay? Can I help? That's a form of advocacy. So it comes and looks differently. And I think the way it's written here, and this obviously predates me, and it predates some of our newer board members, it's written in a way that, and Mr. Johnson, I'm going to ask you to since we worked on, and what we worked on was just a rough draft, but we centered it on research and best practices that our teachers can be solid advocates for kids, just like our coaches are advocates, teachers are advocates, if they're sponsors of clubs, they're advocating for students. So we looked at this potential revision through that lens. Not
Revision
that,
of the advocacy piece.
correct.
Okay.
And I think that you're conflating politics and advocating for kids, and we don't view advocacy as a dirty word or as a bad
Right.
thing or a negative aspect of things. So I was very clear when we drafted something, and we meet in our policy committee. Wasn't anything I was married to or anything that Ernest was married to. It was just a mere suggestion. And then we just had some best practices. We cited some research on how teachers as mentors, we had data to back it up. It can be a solid thing. So we didn't look at it here as the way it's written here in advocacy. We had a kind of a different view of things.
I mean, I'm interested in, I guess my question is, why didn't that make it to this meeting? Why isn't that part of the discussion? If we're
Well, because we're moving forward with the political activism.
We find it's, they're
Political
combined
activities.
here. There's, I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, but we're talking politics and then we're talking advocacy. And we
Okay.
just didn't.
So I've seen that draft,
Mhm.
and I would feel better or more comfortable supporting going back to the old 321, approaching it like we did with 109, where we looked at everything and we made the policy broad, but then we had a detailed AR come in, and it still covered all the issues. Going back to just the old policy without an understanding of our strategy moving forward just completely removes, I mean, this talks about neutrality in curriculum and classroom instruction. It also talks about advocacy, the current policy, and those are things that need to be addressed somewhere in the district.
I feel strongly, and I don't want to single you out, Carolyn, but I thought about you a lot. That's actually why I wanted to call it Tracy this week. Because we've had conversations, you're a pretty conservative parent, and the reason we ever did an advocacy policy, some of you guys know this and maybe some of you don't, you know, whatever side you're on, like our world is just fueled with, you know, a lot of tension and activism coming from both ways. And we had, you know, we had multiple teachers handing out the pronoun sheet saying, "Can I tell your parents?" We had a teacher who actually took it upon herself to email the staff at the high school, I believe maybe it was addressed, asking teachers not to use gendered identification such as mom and dad.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Because I think what we're struggling with is, that's the reason why I've been asking for everyone to share whatever information they'd like us to have in this discussion, because I really want us to use verified information when we're making decisions. And you're talking about things that most of us have no, but send it to us before the
You were at the
meeting.
meetings, you know what
This is a
happened.
public meeting, she
This
is
a
allowed to
public
have
meeting.
her time and speak what she wants to.
I'm suggesting though, when it comes to how we formulate policy, it should be based on like verified information that we all have. That's why the policy update plan is there.
Research out there. There's
But
your
it was
research,
in
there's
public
our
meetings.
research.
Please send it.
No, so, okay.
Leah, we
I
had
wanna
in
back up to
our
the process,
district,
too.
a teacher ask other teachers, please don't use gender
I've
identification.
never heard that until you
I'll
just
send
said
it to you.
that
I
to
went
me.
around the whole
Please do,
school.
that's
You were at
why
our
we were
school board meeting.
asking.
Leah, I've shared this with you before. We had the pronouns, we had, hang on, I have a whole list here.
So those
And-
are things that should have been shared with everyone on the board, because even if I
she's
was
sharing
someone
with
who's
us.
had
I'm
the
sure-
meeting
I
on the
shared it
board.
with you last watching
But
the meeting multiple
may I
times.
please just make a suggestion? I don't want us to get wrapped up on one incident that may or may not have occurred. I challenge Ricky about this, but I'd like for us to take a look at this, and if we need to have an AR attached, and that's the will of the board, we can do that. But I don't want us to get hamstrung on this, what may have happened in the past.
Well, that's fine, regardless of what happened, let's just take your comment at the last meeting that, you know, safe space stickers allow students to know this is a person I can go talk to about my sexuality. A lot of people have issue with that, and I think as a district, I really would like to talk to Mike about it. A lot of parents I would have an issue with any teacher talking to my child about something private without my knowledge. They're
Ricky,
not
I've
trained on
been
it,
to,
that's out of their purview.
I've worked at districts throughout Bucks County, being an
Okay.
electrician. I've been up and down Bucks County, Lehigh County, Northampton County, Carbon County. Penridge is an outlier when it comes to having this advocacy policy, and Penridge is an outlier to having things like the safe space stickers.
It
We're
doesn't
not-
mean
But
that.
we don't, I'm
haven't
not worried
established-
about what
But
other
listen,
districts do,
I-
I'm
and
saying
because I get
that,
worked up and all this stuff, I wanted to write a thing here, and I'm gonna read through my.
all right, when you're done, let me know if I can finish what I was
Okay,
saying.
yeah.
You go first,
Can we
Chris.
let her?
Yeah, can we let her finish? or
Yeah,
what?
Thank you, guys, thank you.
I mean, come on.
The point is,
Right.
I used to teach, you wouldn't want me talking to your child about pro-life or pro-choice, or we have a lot of contentious stuff. It is not the spot of a teacher to take on those conversations. Our teacher, if we trust our teachers, we trust them to refer the kids to guidance. If we trust our guidance counselors, we trust them to say, this might be a situation where the parents are not doing their job. And then we have a whole social system to handle that. It is not the job of the teacher. And there are people who would have, most parents, such an issue with inviting private conversations between your math teacher and your student. I mean, I get there here 8 hours. You have a math teacher an hour a day. That's not the person I want my kid talking to about any of that. And then where does it end? Do we have to then, if we're gonna say you can put this sticker, and there's one kid in the school who says, I am really pro-gun, then I want an NRA sticker. I want a pro-choice. I want a pro-life. We either have to do all of it or none of it. We cannot just decide you can, defend this student but not this student. And then if you have that sticker, you're allowed to go talk to teachers about things that really, I think the administration should be saying to staff, you cannot talk to students about that. That is not what we hired you to do. Because we didn't. They're supposed to come here and learn academics. And we want to help them, and I think you're probably a great teacher. Sure, you have a way of doing it, but it's not having a private conversation about something that you're not going to tell the parents. It's just insanity that we're here. And to try to do this you're transphobic and you're racist, no. We have resources for those kids. It should not be that you have to put a sticker on your door and that says, by your own words, this is a person I can go talk to about my sexuality. So inappropriate for a public school system. Can they go talk about, if I see a student, if I'm a teacher and I see a student who is depressed, confused, gay, can I then, if we're gonna do that, I also then can offer them a Bible verse and tell them Jesus is their savior. Everything goes now. Everything goes.
Which
No,
it
Ricky,
can't
I think
because
you're
there's
very
actual laws against
oversimplifying
that.
this.
Separation of state, there's.
There are people though who
No,
will
you're-
say,
Can
listen,
we-
you have a
can we
drug
stay in
addiction,
order?
you have this, God can help you. You want only for people to be able to talk on your talking points.
It's not my talking points. So I think you're wildly oversimplifying this. And I think that is a big issue right now in this district. The easily digestible answer is where everyone wants to stop. And there's a lot of nuances to the day-to-day working of teachers in our schools with our students, etc. No one is advocating for teachers to be inappropriate with a student,
A
anything
conversation
like that.
about their sexual preference is inappropriate.
Excuse me, let me interrupt. One of the board norms we agreed on was everyone would get a chance to speak, go around the table.
Okay.
And we don't want to have separate debates going on in the group. I just don't think that's the way we should do things. And I think Chris was up next.
Okay,
and
sorry,
Anybody else wants to say something, they should get a chance to.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just pulling something up here. Let me regroup my thoughts.
You can.
Okay, so, number one, as I said at the last meeting, there were students at the district that reached out to me because I've spoken out for them at this district. And they have said to me that seeing items that are reflective of who they are give them a feeling that they belong to this district, that they feel safe within this district. It provides safety in situations where they're unsure where to go in the moment in this district. They feel like they have limited options and knowledge of who to turn to when a situation escalates. A student actually told me that he's afraid to go to the bathroom because he was afraid that he's going to get beaten up in the bathroom. Has no idea who to turn to other than one teacher within the district. They have the consensus feeling that there's so much happening with so many students and the situations aren't being handled. Let me scroll down here. The thing that I think that really blew my mind is the fact that some of the discussions is depending on which argument best suits the needs. We either have children or they're adults. When we were talking about the bathroom, they're children, but then all of a sudden they're men in the bathroom. It's too easy to get wrapped up into this whole ideal and be able to talk all these different talking points. The thing that I had written out, because I'm not a public speaker at all, I wrote out, I said, I'd like to begin by stating I've never shied away from what I believe in at all. And I made this known throughout all of last year when I was door knocking. That being said, I'm a compassionate human, and my youth was spent in the service of my Baptist faith, which is what shaped who I am today. I believe my service in humanity begins with self-sacrifice. This is regardless of socioeconomics, race, religion, disability, orientation, or gender. compassion for all individuals regardless of where they fall in the spectrum of life. Matthew 25 taught me to welcome the stranger, and 1 Peter told me to keep fervent my love for one another. And any policy which alienates or oppresses even one student in this district is a disservice to all of our students. As I sit here given a voice to represent our community, I will always advocate to protect each and every child that walks through the halls of these buildings. And this will be done without prejudice to who they are. With that said, I'm not going to sit idly by while our students are confronted with hate or division. I will not let who they are be used as a justification for policies of intolerance. I was sickened by the stories I've heard over the past week of racism that's occurred throughout our region, close to home, in districts nearby. If we truly love our community, we need to be reflective and address this intolerance head on. As a board, we need to stop and take a moment to really listen to our students and their concerns. We need to put aside our personal beliefs, whatever political or religious dogma we ascribe to, and really listen to them, to our students. The nearly 7,000 students we're supposed to care for and provide a safe and meaningful environment to. And this is why I believe vague and obtuse policies like the advocacy policy do no service within our district. No policy should do harm to any one of our students. We need to stand up for every single student within these walls as if they were our own child, because when enough becomes too much, it might be too late. And I truly believe that. I think this policy is vague. It does nothing to set up to help the children. All it does is creates a situation of fear. There's no belonging. There's no sense of community among all these students.
Hey.
There's no sense of belonging to any of these, to some of these students. And they've expressed it, that they're afraid of members on this board. That they're afraid to come to some of you to talk to you about their fears and what they're experiencing within the high school. And I can't live with myself to be up on a board with 9 people and have to sit there and listen to the arguments back and forth, knowing the fact that there are children in this district, in this school, that walk these halls in this building who are afraid of you guys because of the policy that was passed, this advocacy policy. And they don't want to talk to you about it. They're afraid to come to you to talk to you about it. And it's not just the LGBTQ students, it's the children of color that walk the halls and the students who have experienced it. And I think for that reason, that's exactly why we need to reverse the advocacy policy. Go back to the political activities policy. There are things that are covered by law that the advocacy policy covers. There's things that are covered by law that don't need to be addressed because they're already covered. Advocacy is just an overreach, and that's why it just needs to be redone and removed.
Chris, can I just say, I can totally sense your sincerity, and I believe you, and I really feel for every kid who struggles. The problem with this is that we've now singled out one group of struggling kids.
I'm not saying one group.
Like, obese kids are bullied in elementary school to the point where they want to, like, in Penridge, we should support every one of our students, and we should not need to identify what cause will
But disabled
support.
students will also.
Remember, we can open it up to debate later.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted, but I'm saying I appreciate your sincerity. I feel the same thing, but I feel for every issue, not just one, and that's what this has turned into, unfortunately.
You,
I would want to repeal it, and I hear what you're saying, because I am, when it comes to my children, I am very conservative. However, I'm also very involved, because they're my kids. So I would welcome a teacher if I knew I have very open communication with all my kids. If I knew that they were struggling with something and a teacher was supporting them, I see it as like a welcoming. But I also communicate with teachers. We have back to school nights, high school, middle school, elementary. I am there meeting these teachers. So for me, I see it as a positive. I see that as, if I didn't trust the teachers in the schools with my kids, I wouldn't send them to public school. I trust the teachers here. So with that said, I see that as a positive, as somebody else. In those 8 hours that I'm not around, if they, with that conversation, if they feel like they can reach to someone, like Mr. Barish was saying, they're interested in the military or the Spanish teacher, something like that, I think that's great. That's how I
all
look at it.
individual
Yeah.
parts, like not under an
Okay.
umbrella, that you have to have it out, you take those individually, sorry, right?
No, it's for everything. It was with what he was saying. It's for everything. I see it as a positive. I don't necessarily say, I don't think we should do a policy for outliers also. But that's how I view it.
All right, mine's a little shorter, but I did write something down too. I support repealing this policy for a number of reasons. One, it was created with the help of the Independence Law Center, a political group that has no business in helping us write policies. It's also an attack on the LGBTQ community, who need our help more than ever. I'm tired of people attacking, making false statements, and disparaging these children. It goes against the very nature of why I joined the school board, which is to support all of our students. Also, the General Assembly has enacted a code of professional practice and conduct for the Pennsylvania educators, and it's enshrined in the Pennsylvania Code. The code does not restrict educators to the same degree as the current advocacy policy. In other words, if the generally conservative Pennsylvania General Assembly is comfortable not limiting teachers' ability to address certain topics, I cannot support the way it is written now. We will continue to work with the administration on a solution that gives our teachers the freedom they need, while also setting guidelines on advocating for our students. Hopefully we can report back on something.
So, I mean, I'll just add, we're talking about a ton of different things. We're talking about neutrality in curriculum, in classroom instruction. We're talking about advocating for students. I mean, I don't think any of us are saying topics shouldn't be talked about in class. We want balanced viewpoints. We don't want personal opinion being shared. And that has to be addressed somewhere. I mean, that's a liability for us as a district if it's not. So again, I think we need a strategy before just repealing this.
But there's no other districts in the county that have this advocacy policy.
Well, I mean, Central Bucks was quoted in the Philadelphia Inquirer article, which our own Vitale was also quoted. And Central Bucks has on-campus speech and expression guidelines. It's not a policy. It does reference their 321, but they talk about for faculty and staff. Put most simply, given the enormous complexity of the subject of expression, faculty and staff should refrain from expressing or in any way taking positions on controversial topics, whether political, religious, or ideological, while on school grounds or during school activities. Faculty and staff must maintain a neutral stance to ensure a safe and inclusive learning environment. I think we need something similar.
I don't think what we have is that far off. Yeah, I don't.
Well, it would only address campaigning. If we go back to what it was, all it would address is
Well, it says,
campaigning.
employees should not engage in political activities during assigned work hours or property under the jurisdiction of the board. That's what we have.
That's very different than balanced viewpoint during classroom instruction. That's talking about campaigning.
Keep going. None of you has had a chance to speak.
I mean, I am in favor of reverting back to the old political activities one. And the reason is that a lot of the language around advocacy, think we would end up, if we wanted to figure out how to make sure all students are supported, just having to add exception after exception after exception. I mean, Rick, you brought up supporting children who are struggling with obesity. That could be considered advocacy. If somebody came in here and said, I have a problem with you supporting those students because I believe that this is a healthy lifestyle and that that's now wrong, we can potentially see under this policy that teacher getting in trouble. We had that beautiful presentation on the pink out that happened. And like I realize, for instance, that disability is in your advocacy policy, but disease is not. And so someone comes in here from certain faiths who do not believe in, for instance, medical practices around dealing with diseases. You now have left the school liable with the way that we have stated advocacy, that the school district is now potentially in a difficult place because of our own policies. When teachers choose to encourage students on days like today, Veterans Day, to engage in patriotic behaviors, to have, for instance, that wonderful presentation that Mr. Barrios had today at the school, to talk to students about the important roles that veterans play, to talk to students about the issues even that face veterans when they come home. That falls under the topic of advocacy and is not necessarily protected by this policy because it's not always part of the classroom curriculum to have those types of conversations. We could be here for weeks adding thing after thing after thing to this policy to make sure that types of speech were permissible. And I think it just covers it better to revert to political activities because almost every negative point out that people have brought up as something that would be wrong with reverting has been something political. To say, support the nation of Israel, that's a political topic. Abortion would be a political topic. It is something around which the government is talking about law. So many of the examples that we're receiving, even within this conversation, already fall under the purview of political activities. I think that's my piece on it.
Can I respond, Ron, since I'm next in line anyway?
Well, I don't know. I'm just trying to settle
I
think you do it.
want to touch a couple of things. First of all, all four of my kids went through Penrith. I can think of one teacher that I don't think was a good teacher, and we've had hundreds. Most of them are great. And my point is, your kids are a little younger than mine, and hate to say it, in 2 years your daughter might think you're like the least cool person in the world, and could have a conversation with a teacher who's not aligned with you, with like the obesity. I'm not saying kids should not be able to come talk to their teacher. My point is, if we're advocating these safe spaces where they can have conversations that their parents aren't involved in, that is so wrong. An obese child is getting bullied because they're obese, or they're poor, they're good, and confide in a teacher, the teacher should go to the parent. That should be the very next thing. And if the teacher says, wow, that parent doesn't even care that their kid's getting bullied, then the teacher should go to the administration, and then they take it from there. But to cut parents out of their children's lives and potentially something as serious as I think I'm gay, or I think I want to be a woman, or I think I maybe feel suicidal. It's insanity to say we're not going to involve parents. It's crazy. And if we're going to promote a safe space for one student, we have to promote it for every student. My point is, like, our students suffer from, 1,000 different things. And if we're going to like scream from the rooftops that like we support kids who are suffering because of this, then by default, anybody in the district who says, hey, my kid has depression, where's the indication that your math teacher is going to talk to you about that? Or we're poor. It just never ends, and we're opening a door for conversations that are being kept separate from parents that are, I think, the last conversations that ever should be kept from parents. And I also think it puts our district in liability. I mean, if I was a teacher, I think it protects the teachers. Like, I wouldn't want to have a conversation that potentially I find out this family what doesn't believe X, Y, or Z, and I'm innocently trying to guide a student through something, and the parents, because let's be honest, there's a lot, everybody's very contentious right now. I just think it's out of the realm of the district. It doesn't mean we're not helping kids and we're not offering 1,000 resources. The way this came into place is because there were some teachers stepping out of their lane, and parents were finding out about things that are happening in this building that should not have been happening without their knowledge. And that's what we're trying to protect here. And I don't think there's anybody here who, if their kid came home and they found out, there was a case in California that's in litigation right now because the school changed pronouns of this boy. They did not tell the parents. Parents had no idea he was even sexually confused. He killed himself. And then they found out that his teachers had been calling him by a different name. I'd sue the district too. That's like what we're potentially set up to if we're not completely transparent and like we teach, and when we see a kid struggling with an issue that isn't that, we have a bunch of resources and administration we send them to.
But we
We
didn't
don't have
have this
private
before.
conversations.
We didn't have this before. Were we being sued left and right? I mean, we didn't have.
I don't think
What's the
5 years ago, a lot of the things going on in the world today were going on then, and there wasn't these conversations.
Wait, we haven't finished.
I want to keep it real quick and to the point.
Yes.
I'm the old guy in the group, so I'm kind of bringing in the last caboose on the train here. I've said it before, I'll say it again, my wife and I took a very advocacy role with my son Adam. He was the first child in the Penridge School District to be in an inclusionary program. And we tricked the school district. Thank God my wife, smart as she is, she tricked the school district. And she got him to accept the fact that he could be in a kindergarten program, and he went all the way to 6th grade. I couldn't have done anything without the school teacher and the aide talking to my wife and I on a continual basis about my special needs child. You have to have the parents involved. If you don't have the parents involved, we are missing a complete step in their education. The parents have to be involved in any and all situations involved with their students in the school. And that's the bottom line, period. Thank you.
I'm gonna keep it short again, but I basically just wanted to comment on a couple of things. Like before this meeting, there was a lot of things that I went back on because obviously it's been a hot topic for a few years now. And there was actually a webinar that I watched a few years ago, and it's on FAIR. It was a FAIR webinar, and there were a lot of people on the panel. But one person I just want to talk about is Dr. Miriam Grossman, who was on there, and it was about social affirmation. And she's an American psychiatrist. She's been in practice for 40 years. Right now, she currently sees exclusively gender-confused children. Again, the advocacy policy is not just for this, but this is what it seems to always go around. And she meets with, on a daily basis with the children and their families who are gender-confused. And some of the things I transcribed that she said, I won't say all of them, I'll just basically say the number one thing. It says, the question of having social affirmation in schools is easy. Until we have conclusive research that indicates a clear benefit, it shouldn't be happening. And that's honestly where we're at right now. And that is why we should not be having any of these, putting anything out there about safe spaces. She even goes on another part where she talks about impact on other students that are not gender confused. When they're getting that, when gender confused or students are getting that affirmation, then students that aren't receiving that affirmation, she was mentioning how they want that affirmation as well. And then that's where she says that that can sometimes also be considered indoctrination, as because then that student is wanting to have the same affirmation that another student's having, and they're not receiving that because they're not part of that group. So I found that very interesting, and we continue to bring up, having to support the LGBTQ community, and I said at the board meeting about Gays Against Groomers coming out and sending us an email, a chapter in Pennsylvania, which they are a part of the LGBTQ community. They are not in favor of repealing this policy. And I know, Mr. Kaufman, you mentioned that the Southern Poverty Law Center considers them a hate group. All Sides, I would like to stop referencing them because allsides.com rates them far left. So therefore they give reasons as to why they call whoever hate group. There's been no specific evidence as to them being a hate group besides the fact that they say they are. And then lastly, I just want to kind of wrap up with the process. Because you all ran, and before you were on the board, there were so many public comments that those new to the board made while we were on the board, and it was about lack of transparency, process, and this wasn't something that you all ran on. Number one. Number two, process was huge. Leah, you even said tonight that you're working very hard to have discussions with everybody. But I'm on the policy committee meeting, and I spoke with Christine, and you reached out to Carolyn and Brad about not bringing the rough draft to this committee tonight, and I wasn't in the loop at all.
I wasn't
So
in the loop
I
either,
find
though.
that
I wasn't told anything.
Well, she said in the meeting, she spoke to you and Bradley specifically.
That it's not, that it wasn't.
It's in an email.
Oh, there was an email came out to talk about.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Is
No.
that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Jordan, just while you're looking at that,
Sure.
we're talking about putting new policies. Everything that I'm doing in these 4 years I'll be on the board, I didn't run on. I didn't have a list of absolutely everything that I was going to run on. It's who I am, and I think we've talked about this over and over again, that you constantly bring that up. It's like I'm really trying to work with everyone, and I do think that Leah and everyone else, we're trying to be transparent. So you're constantly bringing that up. I'm not sure why, because I didn't just like, I'm not bringing up things that you guys ran on, but I didn't run on. I am going to be doing all of these things. It's like who I am and what I'm about. So there were highlights, but I know there's been public comment, and I know that you've brought it up several times. So there's going to be things.
Answer to it. Like,
there's
you
going to.
want people to ask you directly. You did not answer to it.
So I'm not able to, if I'm running, to tell you exactly what I'm going to be doing in those 4 years. That's sort of
People ask you directly, specifically
impossible.
about these issues, Carolyn.
I'm just letting you know that that's sort of impossible. So if we're trying to work together, you bringing that up doesn't really show that.
This
And I'm
isn't
just
working
letting you
together,
guys know that I
but
really
was
am working
included on the
together.
policy committee discussion.
One at a time, please.
Yeah, so we got this like late on a Thursday and needed to have the agenda out. I was trying to just move as quickly as possible to figure out what we were doing.
So you
For
can't say
committee.
not
Wait,
contacting
wait.
somebody on the committee.
I was the one who said,
Well,
I
we
was
just,
the one who drove this.
but we also just needed to know if the majority of the people on the committee were like, I don't want to do this, then it was already a done deal, right?
You guys
It's a
owe Dave and Megan a
consensus.
huge apology for calling them out constantly.
I think there's a big
I think we
difference
have-
between.
I think we have the
I
consensus to
still
move on. I think we have the
Rules for
consensus to
thee,
move
not
on.
for me. No.
All right, well, I just have a couple, because I haven't made a comment, but obviously. And following up to what Carolyn said, I think the biggest thing for me that resonated when I spoke with voters, I was very clear that I'm probably the most liberal person being elected. A lot of these things we didn't make a group stance on because we had very different opinions on it. Anyone who wanted to see my opinion could have seen all of my comments I made at board committees. Like, this wasn't a secret, any of this. When we had the forum, we all answered our questions based on how we thought these things should be addressed. So one of the things that was good was that we are representing diversity of thought. Like, the dangerous thing, honestly, is when you have a group of people who only think the same way and will only agree to everything collectively. That's not how you want to run a school district. Second, with the process, like, this is a bit of a no-win situation. Like, I understand, but this is nothing like how this policy went through the first time. It was ran through on first read, and actually the version that was approved was never posted publicly until the board meeting. So it's very different than how the previous board was operating. Are we always perfect? No, but we're definitely trying. We're doing the reads, we're having the conversations. Ricky, what are the thousands of resources we have in these districts for kids for any problem or concern they're having that day to go to? How many guys, like, we're not even staffed enough to handle that.
No, we are.
I'm not staffed.
Sorry,
We're not
I'm sorry.
staffed
I want to
enough
interrupt
to
you.
handle-
No, but like,
But you're acting like every student needs that resource, and that's not the case. So I know you're thinking like we need a certain amount of guidance counselors
No.
for all the students.
What I'm
Not
saying,
every
though,
student is
Well-
experiencing
is
that.
there are things that, there's a lot of talk around this becoming a one-issue topic, when really, like the examples you gave, to Bradley's point too, everything else is covered in politically activism. And even someone who comes to a teacher and is like, I feel like I want to hurt myself, they have to take them. They can't be like, oh, let's go and talk. Like, they would have to take them to guidance counselors. So there's
Self-harm has a
processes.
specific thing that
There's
has to be followed.
processes in place for all of them, except sexuality. So it's one topic for you guys. The whole purpose of the advocacy policy was that only last little piece that isn't covered by everything else.
That's not, I disagree with that.
So if there's children who are like if there's an issue where, any student comes and they're like, someone's making fun of me because I'm overweight, etc. Like, a teacher could have a conversation with that student. I know that's not political, exactly. So a teacher could absolutely have a conversation with that student. No one's stopping them. The current advocacy policy is stopping conversations. And this whole idea of neutrality, again, I've been asking for over a month for any one of you to send me even a definition of what you consider neutrality in a classroom. I haven't gotten a single response. Any research that shows that neutrality in a classroom is better.
To neutrality in a classroom?
I don't think you even understand what neutrality in a
So that would
classroom
be showing two sides.
But,
So there's,
is it?
let's take climate change. This is, scientists, some believe this has caused climate change and there's global warming, and then there's data that shows from a different group this isn't actually accurate. We might know in 100 years, we might not.
So that's
But are we gonna
your,
show both sides?
that's
or are we
your
just
interpretation on it. And the
Is
problem
your
is,
interpretation,
my interpretation is we should go based on where the most scientific evidence is.
There you
Like
go.
evidential basis.
This is where there's so much conflicting.
I
You
mean,
just favor your scientific.
No, I'm figuring truth, Jordan. It's true.
but science evolves. That is what
That,
science is.
and
It
we would
evolves. You have to-
continue,
you have to-
absolutely, as silent, as,
Come on, look, we're not gonna agree to this
I'm
stuff, okay?
just gonna say real
I understand. Wait,
quickly
let me
though,
finish.
that you shut me down a lot, and I wanna
Well,
finish
I'm
my
shutting
thought
everybody
because
down, I'm
you,
not shutting you
but
down.
this is, like, I'm chair.
You're both shouting
This
at
is,
each other, you're both shouting at each other. I'm
so
not shutting
please
you
stop
down.
interrupting me. The truth, what we should be educating our students on is the best scientific practices at this time. Of course, science evolves. Like what my children are learning now is different from what I learned. It's not political. It's nothing like that. It's just the most recent thinking. That's what science is. We want to encourage them. So kids should be able to ask those questions. Like I've heard that actually there's some scientists who think this, and that can be a discussion around like, all right, well, let's look at that. And let's look at the evidence that shows this and your evidence. And right now, if a teacher does that, they're gonna be accused of not being neutral, right?
Good luck.
Well, why do you act like it would go in front of, again, I feel like you always act like it's going in front of the whole classroom. But again, if a child is going up to the teacher to discuss these things, you're having that conversation and then you're helping them wherever you need to try to find those resources. But you always position it like, or at least my perception when you say that, is that you're then bringing a child that comes to you and then you're bringing it to the whole class and you're having these discussions.
No, that's not what I said at all.
But that's what you said. Like,
So what is mixed
having
in
this
here, and what
balance
Christine
and
was suggesting, was that we also now need a policy that addresses neutrality in curriculum, neutrality in resources. You can't even define it. You cannot define it.
Okay.
And
There
all
should
it
be balanced
does,
viewpoints. They're like balanced.
that's still a very much a
And that's
matter of
curriculum.
opinion.
Opposing viewpoints.
But there you go, opposing.
But even opposing viewpoints, like, I could sit here and be like, it's daylight. Are we just gonna agree to disagree?
Well,
Like, it's
not-
obviously
like that's a terrible, what?
But no, but it's not a terrible thing.
What?
There was a balanced
I
viewpoint.
think Bob has a comment. No, really, I don't think we're gonna change any minds here.
All right, well, anyway, I
don't think
propose
let me
moving
finish.
forward with
Let
the
me
agreement.
I don't think we're gonna not convince each other of each other's beliefs. We can sit here and talk all night.
Sure.
We are here to reach consensus. That is what we have to do.
I agree.
If you wanna continue this discussion
definitely
outside,
don't.
please.
Ron, I agree.
So let's move on.
I agree though with Christine. I think if we're retiring this, we should have something in place for all these open-ended things before we do that.
I disagree. I want to retire as soon as possible, and then we will figure out what to do. But we can't even define what neutrality is. And once we do that, I do believe there is a compromise out there, but I'm not waiting because the way this policy was done, I personally, it's my opinion, the way it was done originally, I don't think the community, I want to get rid of it, and I don't think it's good policy. So
Well, can I
that's why.
request then
I'm
that
against it.
advocacy be put on the policy update plan and we'll discuss that?
I mean, we can look up neutrality in the dictionary, like, I don't
Yeah,
have to
right,
send
it's
that
not
to anybody,
really
like,
that
you know,
difficult.
Well,
we don't.
that's my point of view,
Yeah,
but I think we have
so-
consensus.
So, are we approving like this to go to vote for second? Or not
It's your
approving,
decision.
but
It's your decision, and if you
do we
think
have
you have.
consensus to move policy forward for a second read?
And if you
final
think you
approval.
do, you can move it forward. If it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass, right? We're not voting on it.
Right, it is the chair.
I think I have a good feeling that it's going.
Oh, now it's me?
Yes, it is.
Not a
To me-
consensus?
Listen, I never
Just
said that-
stop, Jordan, it's
It is a
fine.
Oh my gosh, I
consensus
never
because you've
said
heard
that.
from us, so then
You
you
guys
guys
ran on that.
feel,
It
so-
needed to be process, and now you're making decisions.
No, it is
No, no,
process,
it's the
process,
committee-
Jordan, we're
it's the
doing that. We've
committee's
all
chair.
That's the
spoken,
difference.
and we
I-
know then what everyone's believing, so it is
No,
process.
it's
And there is
very
transparency.
I will take a moment here, just because I do want to address that, because I'm sitting here at every meeting, for the entire meeting, missing out on time of putting my children to bed, reading them bedtime stories, to be here with all of you. The process that is followed from that last policy committee
I'm
meeting,
sorry, the process of what?
the process that bringing this to this point has
Okay,
followed,
okay.
to this point, was brought up at the policy committee with both versions of the draft. The consensus of that meeting was to bring the political activities forward. Or the sense of the meeting, or whichever terminology you want to use, that was the terminology. At the end of that meeting, we had a statement from Ms. Rash that she was going to check with Mr. Miller to see whether this counted as the first read, and if it did, that it would be brought up as the first read at the next board meeting. Ms. Rash, you brought up emails sent to people. The email she sent was to every single member of this board in our email asking whether or not we had data that we would like to put forward so that everyone would have time to read it and prepare so that we could have good, substantive discussion of fact-based research here in this meeting. Because using peer-reviewed sources, using that type of fact-based research takes time and digging and effort. And therefore, she sent that to all of us to request that information. And then finally, there are issues that are spoken to between the chairs of the board and whoever their duly appointed contact person within the cabinet is. That information is not shared with anyone, which you alluded to it being shared with people, that there was some sort of draft policy that we were supposed to know about.
From with you and
No
Carol.
interruptions.
That would be 100% incorrect.
Leah said it herself in an email.
Let her
I did
finish,
That's why she
let her
had
finish,
consensus
please.
to move this, 'cause
Yes.
you
She had
and
consensus
That's what
at
she
the
wanted.
last
No,
board
I've,
meeting.
thank you, Angela. I've spoken with Ron,
Whoa,
Angelo,
whoa, whoa.
Carolyn,
Putting
and
out
Bradley,
the administrations.
and the agreement was to move forward the second read of the political activities policy.
That was
It was
at that
the
board meeting.
At
No.
the meeting.
I've spoken with Ron, Angelo, Carolyn, and Bradley in the agreement. This was after.
It was
So
regarding.
no,
Right, but she
said
said,
before
to
sending
your
out the
question that you asked her, that was her response, because that happened at the
I wasn't
board
No, no, no,
meeting.
that's, that is about
November
a
2nd.
draft that the administration was gonna present, and it didn't make
Right,
it
it
to
didn't go
tonight.
through
And
that.
Leah said that you and Carolyn.
They were gonna bypass that rough draft.
Bypass.
Yes.
Can I see the email?
We can talk about
We-
this outside.
Yeah.
We
I really do think we
messaged
should
about
move
it,
on.
Bradley. We
Okay,
messaged about
gotcha.
it, where I was
I
like,
think
there's a
we're
proposal
accomplishing it.
for a like draft advocacy. We'd like to move forward, we're just continuing forward with political activities.
Okay.
And the issue Jordan has is she's on the committee and never was involved in that conversation, and Leah said, well, I had consensus
Which I'll
about
be,
it.
you're allowed to do that, 100%. But you guys always say process and everything in the past, and then when it comes to it, then it's okay. So I'd have everybody in full transparency.
We're following the process. Jordan.
Okay.
We will
But
disagree. We will
transparency is
disagree.
huge.
I think you would have reached out to Jordan from the committee.
We literally had like 2 hours to decide that.
We were able to reach out to everybody.
You messaged
You can
him,
see
you
how
could
that
have
looks.
messaged me.
All right, we,
Okay, so we'll bring it forward for a second read. Next policy committee is scheduled for January 6th.
who's on there? Keep it
I am.
on.
Next,
Very-
did we have any,
You wanna-
Post public comment.
thank you.
I got it.
Thank you.
Next is Personnel Committee, we're looking to see if there's any public
Julie.
comment.
Just checking on public. explain the situation. We're on,
So we have second public comment for policy, so we're gonna,
Yes.
before we start personnel, we're gonna do the second public comment for,
First up is Laura Foster.
Oh, mine was, I meant for just like the end of the meeting, I'll pass it.
It is the end of policy.
Oh, but that's how you do it not? Okay.
Well, or
I
did
didn't
you?
think we did, but
Well, I mean, I actually do have something to say about policy.
So what we're doing is we're doing any comment at the beginning
Yeah.
if people can't stay. But we're still having each committee before after too. That's why there's like 20 sheets out there. So you were signed up for policy specifically,
Yes.
second comment. That is right now.
Okay. So, Laura Foster, East Rock Hill. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the PACE survey. I am a part of an advocacy board that meets with Children First. And so all of you have seen the PCCY report, which is now Children First. They put out a biannual statistics on what's happening in districts across the region. So it's really interesting. They're going to be coming out with it in January. You guys will all get like a copy of it. I'm sure like either myself or someone from Children First will be like making sure that you get that information. So you guys know what this report is like. You've all been sent it a million times. Like you know like what information is in it. It's really comprehensive look at academic performances in regional school districts. There's a multitude of variables that are looked at with this, like socioeconomic status, housing, like the demographics, like who's coming into our communities, who's leaving our communities, emerging trends in the county. So in this advisory board committee, I'm there with a whole bunch of other school districts in Bucks County. And there was only one district that had insufficient data that couldn't report their information fully, and it was Penridge, and it's because we don't have the PACE data. So I think this is really important in terms of like looking at academic prowess of our district and trying to see how robust we can be. Obviously, we know that the PACE data informs so many other things outside of this report, but it's so important to have this data. So I do think that it should be something that you opt your child out of. I personally don't like it when I get online to sign up my children for, taking out for pictures, whatever, to say things like, this is controversial, are you gonna opt your child out? Because you don't know what controversial means. So to define that, I think is very nebulous, and I'm 99% sure that it was put in part by the past board because they don't want the data to show, they don't want to collect any data. I mean, Jordan Adams clearly said that we want to get rid of all data collection in public education. So this wasn't about this being controversial issues. This was about a political move that they followed through Moms for Liberty to do this. This was very clear that they did this. Wait, am I done?
No, you have a minute.
Oh, okay. So just in that space of it, as a parent, when I'm coming in, I do believe, Angela's suggestion, whatever, have a letter go out and be like, the PACE data is coming out. You have that information. Every parent should have it. If they can't find it, that's a parental issue. If you can't figure out how to know what's going on in your child's school through Seesaw or whatever, then that teacher can help that parent figure that out. But to put it in there that you have to say that this is something controversial for your child to participate in is pretty ridiculous in my mind. I'd be like, here's the PACE survey. If you're not interested in it, every other thing that you have your the GPS or panties in a bunch about, just friggin' opt your kids out. Stop making this something that's going to have a negative impact on information that's relevant to our community and relevant to not just our academic prowess, but also the supports that we put in our schools. Also, the only school district in Bucks County that doesn't get the 21st century grants. Only one. So this is free money that we can have that we don't get. Part of it because we're not having PACE. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Maggie Connolly.
Hi y'all, Maggie Connolly, Percy Borough. I had recently had a discussion with an upper level Penridge administrator wherein they told me about an incident that occurred in a previous role of theirs as an educator in another district. Sadly, a student member of their school community committed suicide. Thereafter, the decision was made that teachers who are willing to be a safe space for students who may be considering self-harm should post an indicator in their classroom. This Penridge administrator told me that in their view, this was a mistake. Obviously, no one wants to see child suicide. However, those teachers who felt they were maybe not the best person to speak to and therefore did not post a come to me indicator were ostracized. The public perception was that they didn't care about the student body, which certainly was not the truth. As someone who was at one point an adolescent, I know that a child's preferred confidant may be a teacher or other non-family member. I also know that I could tell, without having to be told who I felt safe talking to. But would those specific teachers had posted that invitation? I don't know. Would I have gone to them if they had opted out? Probably not. So what's created then is a system where kids who feel most comfortable with teachers who happen to not specifically request talking to children about personal issues have fewer people to go to for support. As a parent, I would prefer it if any of my kids' questions about self-harm, religion, or LGBTQAAIP2+ curiosity were directed to a trusted family member. In an ideal world, teachers would be a safe sounding board for students. In case you haven't noticed, this is not an ideal world. I go to the back to school nights, which gives me about 30 minutes that I split with about 30 other parents, so I try to get to know the teachers, but there's limited opportunity. So the majority of teachers to me are essentially strangers. If a stranger at Markey Park talked to my child alone and said, hey, do you have any questions about your desires or fantasies, anything you want to talk about, what makes you feel good, I would call the cops. This is unacceptable behavior. Furthermore, it is unfair to put teachers in a position of opting out and being presumed by some to be callous, or opting in and being presumed by some to be creeps.
Next is Ross McClellan.
Ross McClellan in Hilltown. Ron, thanks for your comments tonight. Okay, I sent you guys, I did a Google search. First thing I saw, neutrality. It came up. Please do the Google search. What I searched was neutrality in schools, and what came up is why the push for neutrality in schools hurts students and hides the truth. So I'd encourage everybody to look at that article. Secondly, I'm well prepared. So what is gender confusion? That confused me. I think what we're talking about here, I don't want to make fun of this, but I didn't know what the member was talking about. And obviously it's gender dysphoria. It is the distress a person experiences due to a mismatch between their gender identity, their personal sense of their own gender, and their sex assigned at birth. The term replaced the previous diagnostic label of gender identity disorder in 2013 with the release of the diagnostic manual DSM-5. That, I think, is what the member was referring to. So thank you very much.
That is it for public comment for and a policy. I don't know if there was any for personnel.
Did you want to just keep going?
Do we have any, Bradley, for personnel? Did you?
Sorry,
Please,
Bradley.
thank you.
I relish the opportunity to do that.
It was a small audience here. Did anyone sign up for personnel?
He's gonna check right now.
Just in case we could start.
You're good?
Perfect. All right, so we'll start with the Personnel Committee. We're gonna start with a transportation presentation that'll be done by Mrs. Mossman and I believe the Director of Transportation, Mrs. Koss.
So just a little bit on historical data as it relates to transportation staff, drivers, bus aides, and van drivers. In the beginning of 23-24, we had 5 employees out on medical leave. Those were CDL drivers. 6 of our runs were open, so daily those routes needed to be covered, and 2 open aid routes. There's some information about our IU students that were placed at the IU and Homestead Christian School that we could not cover due to staffing issues here. Throughout the school year last year, we hired quite a bit. 5 of them five CDL drivers retired. 2 of our CDL drivers resigned last year. Moving down, we did hire 11 CDL drivers last school year. Current operational needs, We have hired an additional 2 drivers over the summer and 2 additional drivers this school year for CDL routes. We have 4 behind the wheel training. You'll see that there's some classroom, orientation. Orientation is where they're still onboarding, so they've done all their onboard hiring process, and then they're going through the orientation process before they can start training. The training consists of behind the wheel training and classroom training. Our classroom training is 14 hours, and then the behind the wheel is a mandatory minimum of 6 hours for the state to obtain the CDL. I can promise you that no driver will ever receive 6 hours behind the wheel. The average is about 22 hours behind the wheel training before they're able to successfully pass their CDL test.
So just for the board's sake, so when you say 22 hours there, is my math correct? In your
Yes.
estimate there? How long does that, when we operationalize that, how long does that take? In
So
days
that-
or weeks?
So there's not a good answer on that. That will completely depend on the candidate. Some candidates are working other jobs and their availability to do the training might only be a couple of nights a week, maybe a day on the weekend. So that particular candidate could take a few months to get done. Others, they don't have a current job and they have plenty of availability, and our driver trainers can train those individuals in between their home to school routes during the daytime as well as the evening and weekends. The fastest we've seen someone get done is within about a month, month and a half.
So a month and a half to 3 months is the typical time frame.
Yes, depending on availability. Do you want me to go through each of these bullet points, or
I'm more
do
interested
you have
in
some
the-
questions?
In the open, is this what
Yeah.
we need to fulfill all our requirements? Because we still have
Not,
the issues.
so this is basically our home to school, transporting our kids into school in the morning and home from school in the afternoon. So I have 2 CDL drivers that are currently out on medical, so we're covering those routes daily. 1 aide is out on medical, so we're covering that daily. We have 1 open CDL position, which is a regular AM and PM position, and that's to cover the jumper. And then I have 2 open van routes that we're covering daily and 3 open aide positions that we're covering daily.
Who covers them?
Those are covered by, currently, we have some substitutes that are depending on their availability. We have our retired drivers that are still coming in to assist us through our waiver program. We have 3 jumpers that cover those, as well as mechanics and office staff. Currently, we have 60 drivers, that's including those drivers that are out on medical, 66 home-to-school bus routes, 3 jumper positions, and 1 of those positions is open, so it should be 4. 4 van routes, we have a total of 8 aides covering the 11 positions, and a total number of substitutes for our home-to-school runs. We have 5 of those and 11 retired drivers that help substitute. Those substitutes for home-to-school routes, even though that there's a number of 5, those individuals are not available every day, AM and PM. I can tell you specifically, 1 of them is available on Wednesday mornings only. Another one is available mornings only, and it's the mornings that they let us know what their other job schedule allows them to come. So that's where the difficulty with how many substitutes would you need to cover certain things is a difficult answer due to the substitutes availability.
So the 11 retirees included, they're considered subs too, right?
Correct.
So you could choose 16 to choose from,
Depending on their availability.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Do you want to explain what a jumper is, just?
Thank you.
Yes, so a jumper is a daily substitute, so they come in every single day, and they cover runs that we have people call out sick on.
So you know you need so many subs per day, and
They're guaranteed 6 hours every
Yes.
day, so they come to work every
Sure.
day for at least 6 hours. And the other thing we probably should highlight here is our retiree substitutes. So we have a waiver that we sign with PSERS that limits the amount of hours that our retiree substitutes can sub for us throughout the year. So even though we have 11 retiree substitutes, we are limited with the amount of hours that we can use them based on an agreement that we sign off on with PSERS.
Can we reopen that or something? Would they be willing to work more if we can't hire people? Maybe they could work a deal where they could do more hours or at least talk to them. Or we're still understaffed, right?
That's a PSERS. It's not the drivers themselves.
No, I understand that, but they're not allowed to. Maybe they can, but they're not allowed to. So don't we talk and open a dialogue with them?
That's what our waiver is for, to allow them to work more than, they're reduced to 90 days before it affects PSERS, and the waiver allows them to work more than those 90 days.
Oh, so we have a way to get them to work.
Yes, we do have that
okay,
waiver for them, and that's why they've been able to assist us. But there is language that all other options need to be explored and exhausted before we put them to work.
So they are restricted.
There's specific language that we
Yeah.
have to follow based on this PSERS exemption that we apply for each year. And then PSERS gives us that specific language that we follow in order to be able to continue to get that exemption every year.
But can we change that and get more hours out of them, I guess is my question. If they work.
The only thing we have to do is we have to work through the non-retiree people first, offer them the work. If they say no, we can use these retired
But
substitutes.
there's no limit that they can work?
That's what the waiver allows us. As
Oh,
long as
I
PSERS gives us,
misunderstood that.
continues to give us the waiver, then normally they would be limited 90 days. Since we get the waiver from PSERS, because there's a shortage of bus drivers,
So
then we're allowed to use
I
them more.
misunderstood. Sorry.
So this is just an overview of where we stand in comparison to local school districts surrounding us. I did reach out to many of them. These are the ones that responded to my inquiry as far as where they're looking on driver shortages. So you can see that Penn Ridge is in a very, very good position here with 0 open routes. Even though we do have some out on medical, we still have an employee assigned to that route. With our hiring, we were able to bring back some of our outsourced work, which has been will be a nice cost savings to the district. It did take 4 drivers to cover some of this work, and that was bringing back some students from the intermediate unit, as well as all of our non-public students going to Plumstead Christian. So we are now transporting those students with Penn Ridge Transportation again. We still do have very tight routes where we are arriving at the end of the window of picking up students in the afternoon, and some of them are running a little bit behind in those ways. We do have some special needs students that need some adjustments in their routes, and so to help with those burdens, we could use an additional 2 routes for the full-size routes to reduce some of those issues, as well as an additional special education route daily. In order to cover the continued outsourced work over at the intermediate unit, we have approximately 36 students there going to 21 different schools. And so it's very difficult to say how many drivers or routes we would need to bring all of that work back, just because of the location of where the schools are and how far away they are. In addition to, even though we might have multiple students going there, where do those students live, and would that be feasible to put them onto routes, and how would those tier? So it could be between 18 and 21 routes to bring those back due to the distance of where some of these schools are and the number of students that are going.
What's the cost from the IU per student there? Is that the 30K or?
So that's kind of what averaged out with the return of those students was approximately $30,000 per student.
But our IU cost is about $1 million for
$1 million.
transportation. Yeah.
But you would need to hire 18 people to do that? I mean, it's a lot
Yeah,
more
some of
than-
these
so it's
schools are
less to
pretty
do it through the
far
IU.
away.
It's probably less to do it through the IU than. I mean, if you needed 18 to 21 drivers, it says, that's gonna be more than that, I think.
Dependent upon where those
Yeah,
schools are
yeah,
located.
it could change.
Our athletic runs, we do need more substitutes to get those covered. We currently only have one substitute that is a regular sub that is available to provide transportation to trips that are over route time. We have had a max of, so far this year for fall sports, 12 trips requested in one afternoon.
How did we handle that in the past?
In the past, many, many years ago, prior to the driver shortage, those trips were covered by our retirees that were eligible to work 90 days during the school year.
So we still have a shortage.
Yes. But we
Not for
are
the-
moving in the right direction for sure.
Not so much for the AM, PM, right, but it's more so for the athletic run that we have that shortage, that we really.
Yeah, that's what it seems like, you're close to, when you're bringing routes back, that's good, that were expensive, but, so we still need to, so how many people, or what's your solution?
So, and that's the difficult piece, is how many people, depending on their availability, right? We've had 12 vehicles, and that's a combination of not just school buses, but truck and trailer. And there's different certifications to be able to drive all of those different style vehicles. And so if every single one of the 12 substitutes is available every afternoon, we would only need 12, right? But if this sub's available only on Thursdays, and this one's only available on Fridays, and so that number is very difficult to tell how many bodies we would need dependent upon their availability.
How many subs do you have total?
How many subs do I have total?
Okay,
I have
so
5 that are willing to do home-to-school runs, and 2 of those are only available in the mornings.
Okay.
And I have 1 that is available and willing to do field trips.
So you only have 6 subs, so there's no way, well, is that our limit of subs, or are we just,
We don't have a limit. It is,
so we
it's
can't
hiring.
get them either?
Mhm.
Is that something we post as a sub, or?
It's posted.
Yeah, they did
So
it that
full-time
athletic
or
one.
sub?
They did
We
the
have
athletic
both.
one, that was
I
nice.
saw that.
We've both posted, yeah.
And all these sub positions need to be CDL, even if they're driving a van, they have to have CDL license or full.
Yeah, so we have offered, some of our coaches will sometimes drive some of the teams if it's a small team. Our largest van is 9 passenger. So the majority of our teams are 20-plus students, which would require a school bus and a CDL.
Ms. Kraus, could you inform the board and community some of the challenges transportation faces with respect to homeless students? And how we're transport one way and the distance and how we have to meet that need?
Yes, so in addition to our regular home to school, we do have what's called McKinney-Vento, and we're responsible for transporting homeless students, foster students, and displaced students, unaccompanied students. So if it's a Penridge student and they are displaced outside of our district, we're responsible for transporting one way. The other district is responsible for transporting one way. There's no mileage limit up for this at all. It is wherever the child is located. If a student in another district is displaced or doubled up or homeless or staying in our district, we're also responsible for that student's transportation one way to their district. Those requests are coming in, quite often. Not only do we have those students coming in, but these students often relocate. And that could be week to week or month to month, depending on their situation. And when those requests come in, our responsibility is to transport immediately.
So those are, hiccups in the system.
Mhm.
So
We
what's
currently
this-
have 60 homeless students at this moment. Some of them are in Ben Salem, Pennsburg, Quakertown.
So they live here, but they go to school over there.
Well,
They
it
live
depends.
there. Depends.
It depends. If it is a Penridge student
Mhm.
that is attending Penridge and they're displaced, and maybe they're, it could be a house fire, it could be any situation that causes them to not have a permanent residence. And so they might be staying with a family member in Allentown, and we would have to go up to Allentown and bring them down to Penridge. But if it's an Allentown student that is displaced and they're staying here in Penridge District, we would then be picking them up in Penridge and taking them to Allentown, and Allentown would do the opposite way.
Who does that? Is it a car or is that a van? I mean, what types is
It
it?
depends on what I have available, but we have minivans, we have 9-passenger vans, we have school buses, and depending on where we can fit that in, we get that done. There are districts that are not able to assist us, and we do have that currently happening right now. But when it is a Penridge student, whether the other district can or cannot assist us, it's our student. It is our responsibility to educate them and get them here. And so we are currently doing both ways on some of our kids.
And how often is that checked? Let's say if there was someone that was displaced, there was a fire, like is that every 6 months is that checked, or to see if they're coming back to live, or can they just live in Allentown until they finish high school and we're still transporting them?
So
How
that
is
that
where
goes
does-
through our district social workers to verify those things and keep up with families. But there are families that are either in the foster care system or homeless system or, different things that it is years, many years that they're in the foster care system. And this is the one way that we can keep those students with some type of consistency in their life.
The reason I asked for this to be on here is, we've had complaints that kids are leaving before the end of the fourth period or whatever, leaving like 2 hours early because there's a shortage of bus drivers. I don't know if that's true. The fact is that we need more bus drivers. And we tried one thing, we've tried a few things. I'm really more interested in what do we need to do so the kids don't miss so much school and they're missing a whole block because we can't get them to the game on time because of the other bus runs. We need to come up with solutions. So that's what I'm looking at.
So I can tell you that we have worked with the athletics department, and we have asked them from time to time to leave a little bit earlier than they have requested, because we have non-public school runs that are going in that direction, and that driver would be able to drop them on their way there, and we might need 15, 20, 30 minutes beforehand, and we have done that. I am not aware of over an hour of,
I have an example for you, and I'm happy to share it.
please send that to
Sitting
me.
in the gym for an hour and a half before.
Yeah, if there's ever something like this, please make me aware of it, and I will look into it, and we will make sure that those situations don't happen.
But I guess what I would like to see out of this is that we need this much, like this is what it is, and I think we can do it in 6 months, and this is how we're gonna do it, not just, I still don't know exactly what we need, so I'd like to come back with it. This is a headache for kids and missing schools. I think it's worse than what you're saying.
Are there challenges at the middle school level with the baseball configuration that baseball's played off the campus?
Sure, it's a headache.
Yeah, they are practicing off campus, so that's daily.
And so one of the things that we would like to do, so we've talked about some possible solutions. We've been advertising a little bit differently. So previously we advertised specifically for substitutes and transportation. We've kind of changed that a little bit to be able to advertise specifically for substitute bus drivers who only want to transport for athletic runs. So they wouldn't have to transport home to school. They could just sign up for transportation for athletic runs. We also heard that there are some teachers out there who are interested in helping transport for athletic runs. So we just advertised in our district through email to our our staff members, if anyone's interested in obtaining their CDL, driving a van to help us support some of those athletic runs, to please reach out to our department. As well as we're going to kind of think outside of the box and see, are there any sports teams that maybe are being transported off-site for practices that we could look at a different age level? So what time is our high school done school? What time is our middle school done school? Could we transport, and this is just a primary example, but could we transport our high school baseball team to practice at a different location versus our middle school baseball team? Because when you think about the time that they're getting out of school, there would be less of a gap of time being missed for classes, but those are things that we need to talk through with the athletic department and some of our assistant principals. So we have a bunch of different ideas that we would like to, as a group, sit down and talk through, and hopefully we have some more solutions that we can bring to the table for you.
That's great, though. I mean, some people they won't sign up because they have to do morning runs, so maybe I'll get a few more. But I'd still like to know how many you think we need? Sounds like we need 12 of them.
Well, and the challenging part, as Jessica stated early on, is we're hiring, but the amount of time that it takes from the time they start with us to get through that behind the wheel training and the classroom training, it can take 6 months. And so we're still, we're still looking like we need a lot more, but we've hired 10, 11.
Oh, well, we hired just 11 last year.
Yeah.
Are they all driving?
They're all driving, and then of course you have to remember our retirees and our resignations, which kind of brings us down. So, but we are up from the number of drivers that we had last year.
Just like to know when we hit our target.
So just a couple of other recruitment events and information. So we had our job fair on October 22nd here in the district. We had 20 people attend our job fair. Some of those positions interviewed for more than one position in the district when they were here meeting with our staff members. We had one individual interested in a bus driver, 4 teachers, 8 TAs and PCAs, 4 custodian, 1 security, 3 for nutritional services, and 2 for playground aides. So we think that was very successful. We were excited to see the amount of community members that came out and interviewed for these positions. We continue to have talk with HR every Tuesday, as well as we will be at the Christmas tree lighting in Percy. And we are looking at our next recruitment fair here in Penridge so that we can start advertising that at our college recruitment fairs when we're meeting with some of these new students coming out of school. So we anticipate that will be in May 2025.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
I thank Tara again. We've gone over the transportation. I think it's wonderful what you guys put together. I was enlightened. I didn't realize that the athletic part, I like the new flyer, I like her reaching out to teachers, so I really appreciate all the work that you guys put into that. Thank you. Next, Mrs. Mossman will go over the student services job descriptions.
So we shared with you 4 job descriptions this month. We shared the supervisor of special education job description, the teaching assistant position, and the personal care assistant. Does anyone have questions about those job descriptions before we move on to our director of student services? Okay. So then we have our director of student services job description. I know there were some questions last time. Mr. Johnson is here that he can help me when we talk about the job description. Yeah, thank you.
Now, I understand that there was questions in regards to number 4 from the board, and then in talking with Tara, it was said that this is what Tara and Ernest decided to go with. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right, yeah. So does anyone have any questions?
This number 4, or it was number 4 down a little further, right?
Essentially.
Essential duties and responsibilities.
Yeah, no, 5 years of
Right.
experience.
Figure out what to do, so.
So that was in the job description before.
what is crossed
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, what's crossed
What
out.
is crossed out
It
was
was
in
in
the
the
job,
job.
yes, it was in the job description previously.
So I'm gonna have the same question, like, how are we addressing those as a district then? If it's no longer the responsibility of this position?
What's the question? How are we,
Just, yeah, how are we addressing these types of initiatives around the district if it's no longer your responsibility?
yeah, and I don't, in terms of number 4, when I applied for the position, I don't believe this was listed as a function of the position.
Oh,
You mean, in what? What do you
In
mean?
the posting.
No, the post.
Who was it?
in the
I
job.
thought it was too,
part
that's
of
why
the
it's
job-
crossed
It was a
out.
part of the job description,
Not
So-
in those.
but not all of the
that.
language in the job description is in the job posting. When Ernest and I went back and looked through the job descriptions, it does appear that in February of 2021 is when number 4 was added to the job description. Prior to that, that language was not there. So that is when number 4 was added to the job description in
And
21.
obviously, I don't have it committed to memory when I applied. I think in
That's a,
around Thanksgiving of
Right.
probably this time last year, I think is when it was, around the time when it was posted. And there was a lot there. There was
Right.
A lot to read through, but
So then even before Mr. Johnson was in this position, like what did this entail then, even with the previous job person?
So, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know that answer. I'd have to
Yeah.
look into that answer for you. I can gather that information. I would need to reach out and get clarification for exactly how, Ms. Summers handled that in that previous role.
you said it was added when?
It was added, when Ms. Summers was hired to the position, and that was in February of 2021.
That's when the coordinate and lead, that's when that was added. So that's been there. So then when Ernest was hired,
As we
this was, this was here.
As we went back and we redlined the job description, that's when we were making the changes to the job description.
Why did you take it out?
It was discussion among the administration and the board.
We did discuss that at one point a long time.
We did discuss that.
You asked to have it taken out at the meeting, like this is
Which-
all
No,
discussed at the
excuse me,
meeting.
so you left it, when did we originally?
So
do
we
this?
had originally looked at this job description at the end of last school
Yeah,
year.
that's right.
And as we were reviewing the job description, there was a determination made that we would bring it back. We would let Mr. Johnson get into his role and really look at the job description and what needed to change. And as we started to work through that, that is when we went back and were able to make these changes. And that's why we're now bringing the job description back for final approval.
So does this leave like a hole anywhere?
What do you feel?
Well, part of Act 55, which is Pennsylvania Departments of Education, part of our professional development, is we do have modules on the culturally relevant and sustaining education requirements that are mandated by PDE. So our teachers will undergo training in that space.
And just to add, it is and Angela just said this, it is a mandated, required training for professional staff members within the district. I actually had a chance to review it before it was assigned. I believe Brad Palmer may also have reviewed it, but I don't want to speak for him, but I can tell you that I did. It was a very, very compelling presentation around the idea of not DEI initiatives, but looking at practices within a classroom that are culturally inclusive and responsive, and how to work through that within a classroom structure, so to give teachers an idea of what best practices look like when you're working with students of diverse backgrounds. And I don't just mean racially or ethnically, but socioeconomic status and other areas that people would consider fall under the guise of diversity.
And so one of the modules is developing culturally responsive instruction, more specifically.
Okay. So maybe can we add some more wording around that then? Like, so it's not just, preparation, but words around how to make them inclusive, like in, whether it's culturally, socioeconomically, whatever, but just a little more meat than demonstrating preparation and working with students, but also like Mr. Johnson, the example you gave, in a classroom setting, like being the person who helps with how do we make this classroom more inclusive? How do we make the district more inclusive? Whether the DEI part of it is like the part that's being treaded very carefully, but so we're saying that like all teachers are responsible for creating like a culturally, economic, ability, inclusive classroom.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. And then would your position be like the go-to person for questions for that, or is that someone else's role? Like if a teacher says, hey, I have a...
I think it could be any building leader within a school. I would think that a principal would have the competence to address matters related to diversity within a classroom, what that looks like in a classroom lesson and or in terms of activities within a school. So I would even extend that beyond the classroom and talk about what those activities look like outside of a classroom space.
So my question would also be, should the language be around coordinating or ensuring that this mandated training happens, or is that?
But I think the mandated training should go through either teaching and learning or our director of administration, not necessarily live right here, because Mr. Johnson doesn't oversee the district's professional development.
Got it.
But it could go somewhere.
It could go somewhere.
Okay.
So, there's some more questions. Again, recognizing the fragility of some people in the community around this. How is this done? So we talked about the classroom level, maybe like the building level would be the principals, et cetera. What about district-wide? Do we have any like sort of district-wide initiatives that speak on being inclusive and?
I would agree with that. I think it's a good idea. I think we're talking about the district-wide initiative on bullying. I see no reason not to have something about diversity and inclusivity at certain points and go through that with the school and start from the top up. I think that's a good way to show we're serious about all these aspects of things that help kids succeed. So I would support that.
So you're looking at it as a district.
Like,
I know
yeah,
some
like
schools
we're
have
going to
it,
do a bullying.
like,
We already started talking
yeah,
about bullying.
okay.
You started that. I thought that was an excellent one. It's, that starts from the top down, and then obviously the principals. It's not something your district does. It's everybody does it.
Yeah, like even I think the bullying is a beautiful example of it. Like if we're talking about like some initiatives addressing bullying, and even something like, well, it looks like body image, something kids get bullied, we could have a kind of like district-wide sort of like, this is how we're going to address body image issues, or here are some ideas on how to handle this, and
just those initiatives,
bring
who would that
in
belong to?
Ilona or something like that.
I think it's district-wide, so we cover each school and principals, and then everybody would be involved. I don't know how to roll it. That's not my problem.
Yeah, because I mean, I hate to lose recognizing the history of it, but I hate to you throw out the baby with the bathwater on some of this stuff. And I feel as if there are opportunities here that we can, from a district level, make some stronger stances around things, even to like social media, like what you see on social media versus real life, like things that are genuinely impacting our students.
So a sneak preview of something where it's in the works.
Oh, well, you don't have to say if it's a surprise.
Yeah, but we're taking a look at an internet safety, social media workshop for parents. And we are definitely committed to activities centered on being culturally responsive. We're also working very, very diligently through different policies and the comprehensive plan and feasibility study with full-day kindergarten and a whole host of other things. But it's definitely something on our horizon right now, and there is training that our teachers undergo.
Okay.
Part of Act 55. So I do think more work can be done. I'm not going to sit here and wing it tonight and say we're doing X, Y, and Z, but I also think when you think of cultural awareness, the new calendar we came up with, where we're recognizing different, groups of people and respecting that, and not just. So we understand there's a lot of work to do, and we're just marked a year being here, but we're trying to take all these different aspects and make Pembridge outstanding. So.
One thing I would add was, I read that in the Inquirer thing about this training that our staff went through.
Yeah.
I think that should be publicized more.
Sure. And
because I'm finding it out from the paper.
Sure.
And
So
this is good training.
I agree.
It's good stuff. But
So
the public should know it too.
part of what Mr. Wers is alluding to, part of our professional development this year for social studies teacher was teaching objectively during a presidential election. So there was a recent article in the Philadelphia Inquirer that Ms. Batisky referenced earlier, and Pembridge was mentioned. And to my recollection, we didn't have any parental complaints, any student complaints about bias in the classroom with respect to leaning in for one side or the other political spectrum. So, hats off to our teachers. And, having been a former social studies teacher myself during presidential elections, it can get heated. Kids are curious about politics, they're passionate about it. And we shouldn't be afraid to engage students, and do so in an objective manner. I had the opportunity to spend some time at Dibler Elementary School. And last week I was having lunch with a grade of first graders, table of first graders. And one of the students told me about the election. She asked me who I voted for. She told me who her parents voted for. And I had to politely tell her I can't discuss who I voted for, but she was excited. And so at first grade, these kids are talking about politics, and we shouldn't be afraid to embrace them, and with some training, because it's, politics is a very, very lightning rod topic. People are passionate about it, as they should be, and we should trust our teachers to be able to have these conversations in a balanced manner.
Yeah, so just reading from this article, Ms. Vitale said that the social studies teachers, I think at the middle school and high school level, participated in 6 hours of professional development on the election and having difficult conversations in the classroom. Some of the training involved role-playing activities to prepare for spontaneous conversations.
Am I missing this? I don't see the article.
I'll email it to you.
Oh, okay.
It's gross.
It hasn't paid.
Yeah.
All right, well,
Yeah.
that walks me out.
Yeah, teachers are incorporating the election in the courses where it is appropriate. So it was well done.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Any other questions, comments?
I just one more comment on it. It doesn't even necessarily have the answer, but I do feel like we have a responsibility to recognize, like, the diversity in Pembridge versus the diversity students might see in the rest of the world, and have activities that help prepare them for no matter where they may land. Yeah. more cultural diversity, other places they may end up, and to
I'd like
see that
to-
as a good thing. And
I'd like to just
Yeah.
share what I think is a nice story. So there are some students at Grass Elementary School of Indian descent, and they approached their principal about playing cricket, which is similar to baseball. And I just happened to be at that building, and students came in with their proposal of cricket, and they have, and now during recess, they play cricket. It's safe, and I just thought it was a wonderful example of, embracing cultural differences. And the principal, Ms. Plur, didn't say, no, you can't do this. She listened, and I just happened to be in the building, and it was just a really, just a fantastic demonstration of being culturally different, and a principal not saying no and embracing this. And it was just a nice story. So.
yeah, I'm not surprised by that. Like, I feel like we have wonderful staff here who handle this regularly. I mean, I was thinking more from my own experience growing up here, even, and I'll never forget completely humiliating myself with things I just didn't know, and I'd be around people from different backgrounds and different cultures, and would say something and I would be wildly embarrassed. Like my good friend, I was like, oh, did you go to Great Adventure this weekend? And he's like, this is a pride flag. I didn't even know what it was. Like, I was really embarrassed, and there was a good friend of mine. And so I want to make sure that I don't think that's the case at all here now, with that stuff, but there is, a responsibility for us to recognize the makeup of our community and the makeup of the world at large, and how to help students bridge that gap around those things.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Human Resources Dashboard that Mrs. Mossman is going to go over.
Sure. So we brought this last month for the first time. This is the HR dashboard. It just provides you with some information that comes out of our HR department each month. There was a request last month for us to place these dashboards on our district website. So if you look under the Human Resources Department on the left-hand side all the way at the bottom, it says dashboards, and that's where every month's dashboard will be located. So this pretty much gives you a snapshot of the positions that are posted, positions that are filled each month, how many positions, and then year-to-date total of how many positions we've posted, filled, resignations, and retirements. So we were starting this last month, and that would have been the first month for that year-to-date total. Moving forward, every month as we share this information, we will be adding to that total so that then at the end of the year, we can see exactly how many positions over the total of the year we posted, filled, retirements, and resignations. You will also see that our leave of absences are listed here from unpaid leaves, sabbatical leaves, and FMLA leaves, and that is for each one of our bargaining unit members, as well as you can see how many people. So currently on FMLA, we have 18 staff members. You can see that one of those staff members then resigned, one retired, and we had 6 return from leave of absence this month. Oh, I'm sorry. Sean,
If there was fewer.
can you see? Oh, there you go. Scroll down a little bit. Thank you. So on the left, it shows you the leave of absences, and you can see exactly how many staff members we have out throughout the month on a leave of absence. As well as it continues to give you the snapshot of our benefits, how many of our employees take medical, prescription, dental, vision, as well as how many benefit eligible employees we have each month for benefits.
So people are using other insurance if they're not?
Yes, so if an employee is hired and they're on their spouse's insurance, live somewhere else, they're benefits eligible, but they're not using our insurance through the district.
So they have better coverage even? I thought we had great coverage.
We do have really good coverage,
I'm
but
surprised
some
the
people
number's that
just,
high.
and some people, I think it's that transition to new benefits when they come here, if they've been on benefits elsewhere and they don't want to transfer over to our benefits. We also have a snapshot of salary placement. So one thing I highlighted last month, and I think it's really important that we take a look at, is our teachers. We have 304 teachers that are at a master's plus 30. So they have a master's degree plus 30 extra credits. So I think that's just very beneficial for everyone to be aware of. We have 540 teachers currently, as well as then you can see professional degrees, tenured staff, and then how many of our teachers have level 1 versus that level 2 certifications. So every year, our staff are asked to or required to submit their column reimbursement, and that ends in October. So this information will not be on our next HR dashboard. So what we'll be doing is we'll be transitioning this second page to some new information that we can share with you. So if there's a question that you have, that you feel like you want to learn more about something that happens in our department, please feel free to let us know. It's something else we can highlight. One of the ideas we had was discipline, just how many discipline incidents are taking place each month with staff members throughout the district. So that will be something that we're going to look to add onto that second page, just to give that knowledge and that background. And then at the bottom, as always, we're going to highlight our upcoming recruitment events as we get more recruitment events and where we'll be traveling for our college recruitment fairs. All that information will be listed there in that recruitment section.
I would caution against the discipline first. It feels kind of weird.
Is this, so yeah, this will be on the website.
It will be. So it wouldn't be specific to what discipline took place or what individual. It would just be an overall how many disciplinary issues we had district-wide, just to give that feedback. I think it's, as we look at this, it's important to be transparent. It's also important to just see how many people we're hiring and all the ins and outs of how the HR department works. But we would not be sharing any confidential information, even when we look at our leave of absences. So you can see how many staff across the district, but we can't share any of that confidential information.
I'm just worried it's not going to look that great for our staff. I don't know. I'd rather support them than highlight issues.
So my only comment is, and I've said this many times before, is this is a snapshot, and in a business setting, if you just present a snapshot, it doesn't really tell you what's going on. And I would encourage, as I've said many times before, is it should be a history with this. 5 years back, so what if 10 people resign in 1 month? Wow, that's what happened last month. What happened, showing this trend is very important to running a business, and to see that, hey, we're doing better. Or the 1 month by itself, it really doesn't say much. So I would ask that you think about that, especially, people leaving is one key metric. I don't think a lot of these need history necessarily, but showing that, and that tells a story. And if you're not telling a story, then you really can't fix it or find what's going on.
So I maybe propose a different presentation, because this right here is this, HR snapshot month to month to month. If you want us to go back, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, things that predate us, we'll try to track down that data, but I know we have a meeting on the books to really get down into the meat and potatoes of what the ask is here, so we can present the information to the best of our ability. But
Yeah, I would say the look back would be like maybe at the end of the year or something. Like I wouldn't expect that every month.
Or
That's a
running.
lot.
Well, once you
Running
start
12.
it, it's very easy to put a point in every month. It doesn't have to be, but I think it shows. I don't think you want to look at it every year, because then something major could happen, right? That's why you look at it. It takes, once you have it going, it takes one data point to put in, and then out comes the graph. So waiting a year, I don't think that's, for this, waiting for test scores, obviously every year you're going to get tested, so it's not worth looking at it in between, but it's something easy to do once it's set up.
How far would you want to go back?
They start with the year.
No, it's like 3 years at least. I mean, unless it causes a lot of hardship to do that, I mean, I assume this.
We'll take a look at what we can do.
What does it do going back 3 years?
Shows you where we were.
Well, I understand, I think,
That's-
but I mean, on a regular platform, I think that people have been, the residents have been made aware of that numerous times. Every time we make a presentation on transportation on a yearly basis, they get that information.
But we don't look back years in transportation.
Does looking back really help us?
It
I
does
want to
when
look
you-
forward. I'm really hopped up on recruitment events. To me, that seems to be a key for you folks in actually bringing in new people, looking at your services. I look at this as a marketing tool. This is marketing 101. Let's make sure we get upcoming recruitment at the top end, not at the bottom end. And look at it from that standpoint of we're growing, we're getting better, but we have openings to be part of our community. Marketing. Going back isn't gonna do anything for anybody. Maybe there's
From a
some people in the
management
community that really wanna dig into data, and I understand that, but the majority of the community, they wanna see upfront, they wanna see growth, they wanna see movement.
I know with basic management, we always analyze trends. It doesn't have to be shared with the public, but every business looks at what they're doing, and maybe it's 2 years, but I don't really care.
No, Ron,
But you gotta keep it going, you can't
Excuse
just
me.
keep dropping.
You nailed it. You said management, and I think you're right on target. We need to have that information.
As a-
Do I think the community needs to
No,
see
no.
it?
Well, they have to see it at some
They
point.
can see tribbits of it, but I think from a management standpoint, oh yeah, we need to see what's
That's very
happening.
important.
But this is a marketing tool, and we gotta make this an effective marketing tool for the district.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And the next Personnel Committee meeting is scheduled for January 13th.
I just want to reiterate again
Oh, I'm so
how I really object strongly to the discipline numbers being added on there. I just don't like that vibe at all, but it's.
And we'll talk about it. when we
Yeah, I
get-
know we need to put it out there, so that's
Okay.
something. Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Next is facilities.
Wait,
You got one.
Oh, I haven't, oh, I'm so sorry.
I saw her run out, so.
Right.
somebody was like-
I've got the timer now.
Alright, so Laura, East Rock Hill. So I just want to talk a little bit about Ernest Johnson's job description. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in my research, that job description is the only one that mentions DEI in the district as a part of someone's role to try to look around the issues around inclusivity in our school. So this item number 4 of his job description was discussed at length at a curriculum meeting with Jen, and at that curriculum meeting, it was this board that suggested that it be removed. At the next school board meeting, I asked what version Ernest was gonna be given, and Ron, you had said that it was the original version, so you said that it was gonna be the one with number 4 in it. I am so thankful that as a district, we're trying to take a wider look in training for staff around these issues. It's been something that's been a big problem here for a really long time. One of the things that I think we've seen through Bridgeport Network and through our work with the GSA is that there has been an uptick in hate speech that has been happening in the schools since the election. We all know about the OCR complaint. We know that since this board has taken into office that there was an amended OCR complaint, so that means that there continues to be issues of creating a hostile racial and a hostile environment based on race and sex. So we know that this stuff is going on. So the place of trying to dig into this and look at this not just as a bigger place around inclusivity, but really talk about the issues around racism and homophobia and transphobia and now sexism in our community is really important in the schools. This is definitely a bigger space than having just teachers being trained on it. It's about the culture of our students. So since since the election, we've had parents come and say things like their child was said oh, well, can I call you the N-word now? Chance of your body, my choice were heard in school. N-word is pretty much an adjective. GSA children have said that they are scared to walk in the hallways because of comments that are being made to them since the election. one of the things that teachers have shared with us is that they don't know what to do necessarily when they hear like the N-word, which is pretty much like an adjective in the school, right? So they're like, obviously, you know, that it's not okay, but if there was something that was like zero tolerance for hate speech, right? And so that the teachers could be, like, have some guidance, be like, every time you hear this, like, here's the mitigation around this. And in addition, I don't know if there is or not, I couldn't find anything on your website if there is, or on like through board docs or anything, if there is a zero tolerance on hate speech. But the other important part of this is not to like, it be like the kid that says something terrible is like a terrible kid, because they're not. They're children, and it's a place on having a conversation with that child, being like, okay, like you're out of school, like your detention, like whatever the consequences are, if you're saying the N-word or someone the F-word, whatever these things are, is that this conversation with the child that's having it too. Sorry, so that they are learning.
Sit back down. Okay, so that is absolutely.
Typically, I wouldn't address public comment, but I just want to go on record to say that to our parents, students, if you have any issues, please contact one of us. I would start with the building principal, Mr. Johnson, contact my office. We have had issues that have been brought to us. They are investigated immediately and with fidelity. I'm not here saying we don't have any issues in our school district. I hope this posture isn't defensive, but I know for a fact when issues are brought to our attention, we do the best to our ability to handle them, meet with students, meet with parents, and try our best to resolve things. So if there are issues, if there are words being stated, I don't know, Mr. Johnson, if you have anything to say, we can
Yeah, I'd like to add, I actually recently received an email from a parent that articulated a concern, or in the parent's words, an issue of concern within the Penn Ridge School District. That communication was actually sent to Mr. Barrios. I reached out once he forwarded the information to me to that parent and asked a few pointed questions, gave different avenues for having those issues addressed. The response I received was about the history of Penn Ridge, and it hasn't happened yet, but it's in her words, preemptive strike against what could be. And again, I think the basis was the parent said that they had 3 children in the school district, and their concerns were about what might happen in the future, considering what they described as Penn Ridge's long history. I'm not going to go into details about my response, but essentially what I wrote back is I can't address what happened years ago, but we're here now to address current issues that are relevant regarding race. They cited in particular My Body, My Choice, but again, had no instances. However, the parent and I have a meeting coming up to address some of her concerns that aren't live or actionable at this moment, but again, talking about what they're predicting that will be as a result of the election. So, and then I'm around, like Mr. Barrios, in the buildings, all the elementary schools, the 3 middle schools. We're obviously connected to the high school. It has not been brought to my attention, and I really, along with the building principals, should really be the first line of defense when those things come. There have been 2, maybe 3 families since I started here in February that brought matters to my attention regarding race. Those matters were addressed immediately by the building principals and myself. I've sat in meetings with all 3 of those families that have brought that to my attention. I'm not hiding, there's no secrets here. If an issue is brought to my attention, I can assure you, the public and the board, that it will be addressed, and it will be addressed immediately, and it has been. So this narrative that it's not is inaccurate and untrue.
Can I respond to this? Because I really don't feel like that's what, I didn't mean to insinuate that was
Well, that's all I have to
the
say.
case, that this was, that for anyone to usurp the process. I mean, there clearly it's continued if you've read the OCR addendum.
if you read it, you've seen that this has continued over the last year.
I will just say, like, I don't think anyone's questioning how administration is handling these cases at all. Like, we know the dedication and the work that goes into getting good answers, finding out what's happening, et cetera. I think, and recognizing that there's like some new admin and some, that there is an environment in the district where I feel like a lot of students feel like it's not even worth it to say anything because of how things were previously. Because it was always handled as a case-by-case discipline level issue. It was always put back to, we're gonna look at this case by case, even when families were coming forward and saying things like, we don't even want to get these kids in trouble. My kids don't want it, because sometimes it's their friend saying it. So now they're in the position where they either have to decide to get their friend in trouble or figure this out on their own. And so that's kind of more like the bigger picture sort of things that as a district we can help, with that. But I agree, I think all the, like you guys, I know you look into them immediately and incredibly thorough. Like, I genuinely appreciate that. But I think there is a level that was stripped away over the last few years that we could start building back, that gives these students a place that maybe even they can work it out with some good tools, because they don't want to ruin friendships over it. They don't want to get someone in trouble, but they don't know how to stop it either. Someone's friend comes up to them and says, yo, can I call you the N-word? And that's up to that kid to figure it out, or get their friend in trouble. So we need another option. I think that's the hope here. Thank you.
Okay, so
That's it.
I think
Is that the only one?
That went sideways.
I wasn't sure. But, so now next is facilities.
Did you check outside for me, sir?
You're good.
I'm good, all right.
Usually.
Facilities meeting?
Hey, where are you going?
Guess I got people leaving.
It was something you said, Bob.
Is this something we said?
We all ready here, folks? Okay?
Yeah.
It's not done.
Okay, we're going with the facilities committee meeting. Number one on our list is the Penrith High School North Middle School Traffic Impact Analysis Report. Mr. Harper?
I believe that's me. So this is the much anticipated traffic's been completed. Traffic planning design did a study of the intersections at 5th Street and Campus Drive, as well as 5th Street and Blooming Glen. And in the report, I believe we're at, let me find the right page, they've made some recommendations to make traffic flow better. This is on page 3 of the report, and I'll just go through it quickly. The recommendations are in the AM, there's an AM and PM version. They did studies of both in all directions, that they're going to increase the timing of movement over the current field, which is leaving the school district, and the eastbound turning lane. Maybe line by line isn't the best appropriate use of your time at this point, but they've proposed changes to improve the traffic flow in those intersections. Has anyone had time to look at it, have any questions, or what else can I answer for you at this point?
So the recommendation section, I did read through that. So leaving, which is the big issue, they're saying reduce eastbound, is it EB is left?
Yes, and there's a lot of interpretation. I'm by no means an expert on all the data they provided, but eastbound, I believe, is the exiting of the school campus. If you looked at...
That would be leaving campus making a left. Is that
I believe leaving campus making a left.
So why would you reduce that?
So one of the premises that I noticed on their changes, that they rate the timing of all the signals in Pennsylvania. They grade them from an A to an F, and that gives different timing. And they've graded all of the what's been studied and found to this point. So C is their goal, what they shoot for. A is the best timing, the fastest movement, And if you look through the different proposals, I agree, some of those are minor improvements. Some of them don't seem to be as significant, but I believe they're taking all considerations here, primarily Fifth Street flow of traffic and working in our exiting of the campus. They're looking at everything, not just from the school district perspective, but the main traffic flow on Fifth Street, which is their road, and to try to find a happy medium while improving things based on the changes we've made.
So, when kids are leaving and the buses are leaving, is that light going to be on longer? It says increase campus drive, so,
And
an increased cycle length.
And I believe that means green, so that the green light for exiting would be increased, so we would have more opportunity to
That's
exit the
good.
campus.
But how much more does it
Right,
say?
it's seconds, and if you look at some of these, some of them are only a few seconds. The most I saw were 10-second increments. So again, they're looking at both directions,
Are they
not
still-
just exiting.
Yeah, but it's not even close to that. What they
Right,
need.
it's, in my opinion, it's minimal is what they're proposing, and I've asked the questions, is there something that we could do to manually control that? And they're totally opposed to allowing
But-
any manual controls.
It does say this is the starting point and can be adjusted in the future. Do we have to do another traffic study to do that, or?
It would definitely be, so they're the authority having jurisdiction, PennDOT, which is through East Rock Hill, that we have to go through all of those, and this cost us about $10,000. We had to do the study, it was part of the project, in order to get the permit, to do the paving and additional parking, $10,000 to get this marginal change. And they're in control because they own Fifth Street and the
Who
ones
owns
that
it? PennDOT or?
PennDOT.
So do we appeal this? or-
We could certainly make some recommendations. I'm not sure where it will take us.
Send them a video of us, of people trying to leave it when you do that, because they're missing the point if that's the way it
I
feels.
can
I
s-
couldn't tell how many seconds, I assume it's gonna be.
It's marginal from what I can tell.
I mean, there's no traffic going the other way when they leave.
So at this point, what they're asking for is feedback from our group. So I can certainly go back to them and say, we don't think there's substantial changes that benefit the traffic flow at that time. I mean, if they may come back and say, the study shows this and that we can certainly ask for more.
I think
That's
we
where
need
we're
to
at.
dig into that, because the other one, coming in the morning isn't a big deal. I mean, there's some improvements there, but the leaving, there's no traffic on Fifth Street. Almost, and yet they sit there for a minute. And you're saying now they're gonna sit there for only like 50 seconds?
It's marginal from what I can tell.
Can we get a politician involved in this? Because I know that they get things done.
So is there
It is.
specific feedback you'd like me to give them to say, we want an extra 30 seconds, an extra minute? What's our ask for them?
So maybe we can talk about it offline, because I don't exactly know what they would.
Right, and there's a lot of data in here. I mean,
I think that's the main reason we wanted to change it. I mean, that's where the backup is. There's no other backup that I've ever seen, except maybe Blue and Glen.
That's certainly our perspective. Their perspective is, we made changes on our campus. How should that traffic signal help regulate the flow on Fifth Street? I think they're taking ours into consideration. It's marginal.
Oh, gee. Well, we had a good one.
Could we?
3 years, 3 years, we're trying to be the.
Well, I think the way it looks like, we need to go back to the planning district, traffic planning and design, and say, what can we do? Are there any ways in which we can, as Ron suggested, increase the timeframes?
Right, timing, I think they may be open to that. I asked for a manual control. Could we get a button to say, give us another
Yeah,
30
I get
minutes?
that. I
They're
get
not
they
gonna
want
say
it.
flip a switch and make
No.
it green, but even a time signal, they said no. They'd only let East Rock Hill Township or the police do any sort of traffic mitigation.
Manual.
Correct.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think that it could be alleviated by knocking down Fifth Street. I mean, we could look at the number of cars that go through there and then count them, so they know there's not much traffic flow. You know, been stuck in it many times.
Quick question, did they do traffic counts?
Yes,
If you remember.
there are total numbers eastbound and it varies every hour from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. They have all that data.
So they have data of how many cars went out too, right?
Correct.
Which is
In
huge.
and out.
In and out.
Every direction.
Yeah. It should
Do
tell a
we
different
have,
story.
That's not what this is about. Do we have control of the no turn on red?
We have 0.
So you can at least get one side going. Well, I mean, it's on our exit, right? Like,
I
You
mean,
know, I don't know
one,
if you wanna do that.
one option, we have the Penridge Regional. They could certainly come and stop traffic if they were willing to do such a thing, to allow us more time. If we hit a dead end here and they say no, we could certainly ask them if they'd help control traffic. I'm not sure if they're willing, but they certainly position cars out there on a daily basis.
Well, that's a possibility, but let's not go down that
Yeah,
alley.
Right, I'm saying as a
That makes a lot of
final
sense.
option, we'll ask for
Last
changes
resort.
first.
That'd be great. Okay, thanks. Ron,
Well,
any more
let's-
questions? 'Cause-
No, it's done. Just,
So now we're to another favorite item that we have, obsolete items.
Yeah, just a couple of things this month for obsolete. From the high school, we have a listing of instruments. They will go on public surplus. And the second listing is from North Middle School, and that is a listing of old TVs and VCRs that will all go and be recycled. These are no longer used. That's what we have for this month.
More questions? All right. Our next Facilities Committee meeting is January 13th, 2025.
all right. Nothing. We'll move right into finance. First thing up is the review of contracts for approval. Lardwell, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, we have 4 contracts this month. The first one is Learn Well. This is for educational services where a student is placed in a medical facility for this school year. The cost is $59.75 per hour. The second contract is Museum of the American Revolution for North Middle School on May 28th, 2025. Cost is $1,925, and that is parent paid. Next contract, excuse me, is also the American Revolution. This is for South Middle School. The cost of the district is $16. $1,551 is being funded by a Title I scholarship that the school received through the museum. And South is a Title I school, so therefore qualified for that. And the fourth contract we have is Music Theater International. This is for the spring musical at Central Middle School, held in March. And the cost for the musical is $740.
So I have a question. The Museum of America, is that a new field trip? Because I don't, I know,
Believe so. I think we went there before.
and Central's never done it?
That I
I just thought, because I know, so my kids went through Central and they did it. I didn't know if it was new, but then I also don't see Central here.
right. It could be that we maybe don't have their documents yet, or they're not doing it. I don't
They
know.
could go at different dates, right?
Could go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that.
That's just interesting, because like, I would think maybe it's new, because last year I had an 8th grader and he didn't go to this. I'm just interested in it, because it looks like it's all 8th graders in North and in South.
I think I remember seeing things for this museum before
That's so interesting.
in our contract.
Okay.
It rings a bell to me. It's not. It doesn't. You know, I'm not thinking that it's brand new to us. I think we've done it before. We can research it,
Yeah, that's,
see what we can find.
yeah, I would just think that all the schools would do it.
Right.
And then it looks like it's for all of the students, so that's why I was just interested in that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. So that's the 4 contracts we have for this month.
Any questions or issues? Sounds like fun. All right.
So the next item.
Oh, you want me to?
Okay.
Well, the next one is tax collector compensation. Everybody got the information and what's on the, we received a letter requesting an increase in the fee. Everybody had a chance to read that. We also put out a comparison spreadsheet of all the different districts in our area and what the costs are. And obviously we need to resolve this. I forget what, January?
January would be the deadline, has to be
Deadline.
done by February 15th.
So we don't necessarily have to make a decision tonight, or, but we'd like to open it up for discussion and get people's thoughts on whether an increase is warranted, or, and if it is, how much, off-road open.
So does this come up every 4 years?
Yes, it's every 4 years, it has to be, if it's going to be changed, it needs to be changed prior to the start of the election cycle. So the municipal election cycle in the year 2025 has to be done by February 15th, which gives the people who are going to run for election a notice of what their pay would be prior to them submitting for making that decision for election. And then through then the 2025 year, the election cycle happens. People are elected in November, and then the rate starts January. So it's actually a whole year ahead of when it'll actually take effect.
I was looking in the spreadsheet, and the only one that's higher right now is New Hope, but that says for collected. How is that versus issued? I mean, I know what that means, obviously, in the English language, but is that a normal distinction, that they only would get their fee
Yeah, so
if
they'll-
someone actually paid their
Yes.
bill?
Yes,
Okay.
they only get paid if the bill is collected, whereas for our collectors, they get paid to issue it. So,
Yeah.
And they also get, New Hope and Neshaminy also get a yearly salary. which is
Correct.
The other ones don't.
right.
Mhm.
They do a yearly salary, which is a little different
Mhm.
than the other districts. The rest of the districts on the list, they pay on a per bill basis.
And we pay the highest.
Mhm.
Is what- even when you look into Quakertown, that they would get the 10 cents increase, it looks like not including those two, am I correct, that we pay the highest?
The only higher rate is the Neshaminy, but that's just for
That's
their
also
interim tax bills.
And that's also salary.
So that's
They also
also
get that, so that's different also,
I mean,
right?
how is that, why is the Shanley higher?
They do a $5, but per bill for their interim tax
Oh.
bills, so they get $5 for those, but they get a salary
Mhm.
for being tax collector.
How many tax bills do we issue?
Uh,
It says
so
it on the,
we
yeah.
have,
Oh,
we
Is
have
it in
that-
the letter? Sorry.
Mhm.
Okay, I can find it.
So we have 19,808 bills in 2024. The commission's at $4.25 a bill, it totals $84,184. We have 939 bills that go into the installment payment process. So when the bill goes into the installment process, then the tax clerk gets paid for each installment. So they get an additional $850 for this total for the second and third installment. That cost is about $7,981. We have two of them who received the $1,500 stipend for a total of $3,000. We have 784 final notices that go out. And that is the taxpayers put out a notice to anyone who hasn't paid their taxes at the end of the face period to kind of give the taxpayers a warning. And we pay $1 for those, so it's another $784. So total paid is $95,949.
And that's just for our tax bill,
That's
like
for-
they get paid for the other tax bills.
That's correct. The
Altogether.
county and the
Okay.
township would pay them to collect their taxes also.
And
And
go ahead. Have the bills increased from when they first had this contract till now for them to want this increase in pay? Are they paying, are there more bills?
So the bill number would eke up a little bit each year as we add properties onto the tax rolls. I could get you data on how many.
But nothing
you
like
know.
overwhelming,
Not
not like, how- you
overwhelming,
know,
correct.
okay, okay.
And really, the more bills for them, the better.
Yeah, maybe.
So then they get,
Well-
they get the paid there, right?
So how many tax collectors?
Right, I think it's right there, right? 1, 2, 3.
8. There's
Yeah,
8.
Eight.
There's one for each municipality, either
Mhm.
township or borough.
8 in Penrith.
Yes.
So that money is split between 8 people?
Yeah, it's actually on the spreadsheet.
It says it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's on the,
I missed that point.
Yeah, it's the
There
D,
you
tax collection 2024 commissions.
I have it up on the screen.
Alright.
Thank you.
So that's the,
Oh, yeah.
so our total cost for the year 2024 is about $96,000 all in. And you can see the increase in cost that would go along with, they asked for 50 cents. It would cost us an additional almost $11,000. So that's about 11%, 11.76% increase. And then I have other, what it would be for 25 cents, 15 cents, 10 cents, 5 cents, just to give you ideas of what the cost, additional cost would be.
Okay. Any other comments?
Not for me, I mean, at this point, do we wanna look at giving them what they're asking for, or do we sit back and negotiate? We don't have a lot of.
It's not a, and they can't strike, right, I guess, so, it's more of a, we offer something
I
and
think that's where
negotiate.
we come from, we think
And-
we should offer them something.
I mean, shouldn't we if they're being paid the highest already?
But I said something.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Should we even do that? Are we thinking,
I think I need to understand more about how other, just, these are a little confusing, so maybe we'll take a look at some more data there, because when they get a salary, obviously, that impacts their total compensation. I'm not sure we know what that total compensation is, so it's maybe hard. But to me, it seems that we are one of the highest in the area. So how much we go up is part of the debate, I guess.
Well, we can talk about that, I think
Yeah, I think
we need to have some conversations about that, but I mean, I think over time, they do deserve something.
I kind of like the idea of a percentage increase per year, as opposed to talking about it every 4 years too, as opposed to just doing this lump sum every 4. But that's something we can also talk about.
So how do you wanna do this? Do you wanna sit back and wait on this one, do you wanna?
I think we should discuss it some more. And,
Okay.
I wanted to get your feedback first before if there's an appetite to do something already.
I guess some of my questions are, like, if the Supreme Court already ruled that $4 was fair and reasonable, quite a few years back though, wouldn't that apply to all these districts? Like,
You would think so.
Yeah.
I think it's a valid question. That was,
Like,
at that point in time, they said that's the minimum.
and it just sort of like, I mean, obviously
Yeah, the Supreme Court didn't rule at $4. That was the
Okay.
PA Legislative Budget and Finance Committee determined the average fair market rate for
Got
elected
it.
tax collection was $4. All the Supreme Court said was that the rate that the two districts who were sued set at that time period was too low. And
Didn't
they
say where to go.
Correct.
got it.
And at that time, the district reset the rate, and they lost the case to $4. That's my understanding.
Okay.
That all happened before I got here, so I'm going
Yeah.
by what I've been told and what I understand the history to be. But the district set the rate low in an attempt to be able to collect the taxes in the district, because at that time the two districts felt they could do it by themselves, cheaper, and the tax collectors took the case to court, and they went the whole way to the Supreme Court, and the districts lost.
That they
And then
couldn't outsource it.
And then they reset the rates at $4.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point is that we could argue that what they're already at is already fair and reasonable.
Correct, you could argue that.
Yeah,
Mhm. Absolutely.
okay.
But if you look at the environment which we're in, and what we've done for other services for the school district, everyone's received a little bump.
Right.
but they haven't been on the higher end.
That's,
They
They
have,
were on the lower
they are on
end.
the higher end. I would agree with that if we were also on the lower end, but they're not.
good point.
But we're not sure we understand the salary issue.
Well, the salary, but if we don't look at, but if we don't look at the other salaries, we're still, taking those two away, we're still higher.
Yeah, if you look at,
But if you're getting a salary and a lower,
well, Michelle used the salary and $5.
right,
They're way above. Pennsbury is 325.
The Quakertown.
Council Rock's 375. Central Bucks is 350.
I mean, even if, let's say Quakertown's 370, we're 425, but even with the other compensation, we're at 425 and they're at 370. So on both,
We seem to be one of the premium payers. I think we need to take that into account. Any other comments? We still have some time, and, but we would need to.
We've got more haggle rooms.
Well, I got a general feeling, but I sense something now.
Well, all right, so I'm sorry, so we need to have it by the end of the year.
I'll tell you that the resolution that's in place right now, and the resolution is attached.
Yeah,
You have the current resolution.
Yes.
That resolution, as written by our solicitor, states that until the board changes the rate, it remains the same.
Okay.
So if the board does nothing,
It stays
the rate remains the same.
That's it.
If the board decides to make a change to that rate, then we need a new resolution from our solicitor with the amount the board decides to change.
By
the rate.
January.
Correct.
So if we work that backwards.
Has to be done in January.
Yeah. So I guess my concern is like, if we work that backwards, I don't know, and we come back to committee or whatever, I don't think we have that much time.
We do not.
Yeah,
But
so,
we have a committee meeting in January and we have a voting meeting in January.
okay.
And the deadline is February 15th, so it's certainly
Okay.
something that can be.
February 15th.
Correct,
I
February
thought it
15th.
was January.
Well, I'm
I'm sorry,
saying,
it has to be ready.
according
We
to our
have to.
schedule,
Oh,
according to
okay.
our meeting schedule,
Then I'm fine.
we would need to do it at January unless we came back with another voting meeting.
No, we
Out.
can make it. We can wrap this.
Based on our current calendar, January would be our deadline.
So sorry, so then what are we doing? We're not,
I'm gonna take the feedback and then send something out to everybody and see if it's in agreement and put it back on there.
okay,
I'm just not comfortable saying it right now. I gotta think about it.
okay. For,
next.
For the next committee meeting.
in January?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that is it.
That's it, yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
that's all we have.
Thank you.
There's no public comment.
Next meeting, I lost the agenda here.
January
No public.
15th.
January 15th. Next meeting, finance meeting is January 15th, signing off for 13th.
13th.